Hello everyone, very good evening and welcome back once again to your favorite channel, obviously StudyIQ IAS English it is. And I'm your educator Praveen Mishra, and here we are going to begin detailed analysis of our GS paper 2 for mains 2025, right? So we have already had a short discussion in the first impression video that what is the level of questions, okay, what are the types of questions and how to approach them as well. But as promised, we shall be coming up ahead with a detailed analysis so that we can go ahead, in some in-depth understanding, in some, some expert manner or in a kind of a profound manner, basically, right? So guys, what we are going to represent is some immaculate level of, that cleanliness of approach that is needed. And for that sake, we have got Soumya Pandey ma'am with us, who shall be starting with the detailed analysis. So she shall be taking care of few questions, and after Soumya Pandey ma'am, it shall be me or Vishal Gupta sir, and finally it shall be Karan Jindal sir, okay, who shall be just taking guard of all the questions. Okay, guys, so starting with Soumya Pandey ma'am, and ma'am, it's over to you.
Thank you so much, sir, and a very good evening, everyone, here at StudyIQ English. One platform who will make your dreams come true, where the millions of dreams are already coming true. And today was the big day for UPSC. And after a wonderful discussion by all the faculties on GS Paper 1, now we are on to GS Paper 2. So in GS paper 2 this time, we saw that we do have a good representation from the polity segment, from the IR segment. At the same time, we also have 3 questions that come from social justice. Okay, so social justice happens to be one such area which has had a lot of representation in GS paper 2 in the last few years. The topics have been very, very varied, ranging from the rising rate of suicide among young adolescent population in India to why the welfare schemes meant for the poor are not exactly working on the ground. This year as well, we have a paper that I would prefer to call moderate, at least when I talk about the social justice questions. Because these 3 questions from social justice part in today's GS paper 2 2025 are not at all difficult. At the very first glimpse, we know that these are direct questions, except for question number 70, which I'm sure many students may have struggled with. Because indeed, question number 17 is slightly indirect, it is very twisted, and it's difficult to even understand what exactly is the demand of the question. I will break it down here for you. I will make you understand the question and provide you with a model answer too. Coming back to questions number 6 and 16, these were easy. Look at the first question. Social capital complements in advancing empowerment and gender equity, please explain. For this 150 words answer, first we need to decode the question. We know that gender empowerment, justice towards women, is a very key component of social justice part of GS paper 2. In fact, it is also there in GS paper 1 social issues. The question is purely asking us one thing, only if we can decode it properly. As I always say, learn to make the question easy for yourself. The question will always be simple. The language that the question is using could be slightly obfuscated. Same thing has happened here. The question is using keywords like social capital. We all know capital means some resource, some ownership, some kind of wealth. Social means anything that has to do with society, culture. Social capital, therefore, combines to become a word which means how many connections does a person have in society? What is the strength that you have in a society in terms of your group membership? Do you have a support system? Do you have people from your family, culture, community, ethnicity who are there to support you? Is there a group activity in which you are involved? That's your social capital, your resources, your all associations in your society. Now, the question says it complements. Now, this complements is not like giving somebody a compliment. Compliment, it adds on to. When you complement something with the word COMPLEMENT, We are saying supporting something additional. For example, healthy supplements can complement a good diet. Similarly, the question says if you have a social capital in society that supports, it adds on to increasing empowerment among women. Because we are talking about gender equality. Now, I absolutely want to tell you one thing very clearly. See, we are living in 2025. Gone are the days when gender divide only meant man and a woman divide. Today, gender is a very broad word. Today, gender not only stands for the binary notion of a man and a woman, but it is an umbrella term. We are talking about the transgender, the third gender, the queers, the people who do not believe in any gender, because gender is a social construct. We know that. This has nothing to do with your biological makeup. So, therefore, the question is broad, and at the same time, it is referring to women and other vulnerable transgender population. The question says if you have a social capital in society, if you have good links and connections with people, it will obviously help you in achieving empowerment. It will provide gender equality. Explain. I hope now you understood the question. For a 10 marks question like this, you cannot exceed 200 words. Let's see how we break this question into three parts: intro, body, conclusion. As I always say, unlike the essay paper, where all three parts have to be written, in the GS answer, all the papers from paper 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to the optional, in all your GS exams, whenever you are writing an answer, make sure you do write the intro. Intro has to be very strong. I have explained earlier, I will repeat. Introduction contains two major things. Please define the keywords of the question. Keywords are the salient features of the question, which are the main points asked in the question. Second part is to make a connect between these keywords. If you have a data, a statistic, a proof, please provide it here because it validates your answer. Go to the body. In the body, we know we need to cover three aspects. I always tell you that. The WHW, why, how, and when. Yes, we will talk about how social capital and social connections help gender equality. We will talk about why does it do that, and we will talk about since when in India have we started realizing the power of social capital in promoting gender justice. Correct? If this is the question, let's proceed with the agenda of the question. Let me just go to the intro. All you need to do is to define the keywords. Always begin looking at these questions with one agenda. I will decode the question. I know the question is direct, it's just hidden in difficult words. Please make it easier for yourself. Now, there is something called synonyms in English, similar meaning words. Sometimes these questions are using high sounding difficult words like social capital, complementing. I'm sure many aspirants may not relate to these words easily. If you know the meaning, try to make it simpler for yourself. Break it down. Socialist society. Capital is a resource. Complements in advancing. We know the question is not saying it creates empowerment. It can only support an empowerment. So make the question very easy for you. The smartest work is the simplest work. The simplest work in life is the smartest work if it's done properly. And that's the approach in UPSC GS papers also. Now let's begin with introduction. What is social capital? In your own definition, try to define social capital. See, we know social capital refers to networking, community sentiment among people. There's a very good word I can give you. It is a sociology word, technically talking, but yes, we do use it when we talk about Indian society. We need to talk about solidarity in society. Solidarity means a feeling of unity. People in a society who live together, they experience a sense of solidarity among each other. Now, India, much before the British came, was so rooted in solidarity that India was primarily into its village communities. Right from economic transactions, judgmani system, to marriages, to customs, to religion, to panchayat. Everything was rooted in religion, caste, and culture. That was solidarity. It came so naturally. In fact, it is urbanization, it is globalization that are threats to solidarity. They create a different kind of solidarity. But the real social networking is even better in smaller primary communities. India is, even today, a society that's completely governed by religion and culture. Agreed, we are urbanizing. Agreed, we are westernizing. But still, the community, religion, caste sentiment is still quite palpable in India. It's very visible. So, therefore, social capital refers to network, shared values, shared traditions that enable people to experience solidarity. That's all you have to say. Come to the second keyword of the question. How does this support empowerment? Please explain what is empowerment and gender equality. Empowerment is giving power to somebody. Empower. When we empower women or trans women, we are giving them the authority to take their own decisions without being dependent on anybody else. It is providing somebody an agency in life to take your own calls, your own desires, economically, politically, culturally, individually. That's called empowerment. Define that. And then the last word, gender equity. By gender equity, we mean a society where all genders, I am saying all genders, I'm not saying one gender or two gender, because gender is today a very wide word. I am saying all genders in society should be given equal footing, equal opportunities, equal participation. This is pure distributive justice. This is the question. Once you're done with the intro, finish your intro by the second step. Please remember these two steps in the intro. Define the keywords. Second, link them together. If you have a data, please give it. How do I link them? I have to say that in a society like India, where so many communities today are living below poverty line, people in India are still in majority of North Indian states, East Indian states, multidimensionally poor. There are vulnerable segments like scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, people with benchmark disabilities, the trans population, people who are the vulnerable tribals, but even among these vulnerable communities, it is always the women or the trans women who experience disproportionately high level of vulnerability. I call this compounded vulnerability. Somebody who's poor and backward is already vulnerable, more prone to backwardness, more susceptible to backwardness. But somebody who is falling into multiple such categories, intersectionality is what we call it. Being a woman, then being a woman of lower caste, then being a woman from a poor background makes you compounded vulnerable. Yes, it is people from compounded vulnerable segments like Indian women and trans population who experience disproportionate deprivation. So today in India, apart from government welfare schemes, apart from educational reform, apart from creating job opportunities, what we really need is taking the advantage of social capital. India is rooted in cultural solidarity. Better to use it to empower women. Done introduction, come to the body. We know that in the body, we need to talk fundamentally about three questions: why, how, and when. Let's see how we can do it. Why and how should we use social capital? Let's start with that. When I say social capital, I am saying a network of unity among people. Can you think of an example from GS paper 2 where poor Indian women from villages have come together in the past and tried to achieve economic empowerment? The question is very easy. What comes in mind is NGO. What comes in mind is cooperative society. But what comes majorly in mind is self-help group. Talk about it. Say how self-help groups that the government of India gave major attention to after 1972 when a woman called Ila Bhatt became one such unique woman to create the Self-Employed Women Association SEVA in India. A lot of people feel that self-help groups were initiated in India. Not really. Self-help groups actually go back to Bangladesh, where a Nobel Prize winner called Muhammad Yunus had introduced the concept to bring together rural women who were working in different informal sector industries like agriculture, dairy, horticulture, street vending, domestic helps. They were brought together. Small groups were created, 15 to 20 young women. The concept was that all these women will pool, they will share their existing resources like jewelry, money, whatever they have. With that money, they will finance a new business. Have you heard of the name Lijjat Papad in India? Have you heard how Amul once began as an SHG? Today it's a multi-state cooperative. You may have heard of Kutumbasri in Kerala. All these are examples where rural women, semi-literate, semi-skilled, came together, joined hands, invested their money, and then scaled up a business. The profits are distributed among the members. It's an informal group. It's based on mutual trust and social capital. That's the question. Eventually, if it's a successful model, there are banks like NABARD. NABARD was the first bank in India in 1980s who started microfinancing in India. They start providing small, soft, easy to repay loans to these self-help group women's. Now with this new loan given by commercial banks, cooperative banks, these women scale up their business and soon they become entrepreneurs. The money that comes in is used for their own well-being. Either it can be an additional income or it can do wonders for them. They can economically support their families because most of them are coming from very poor backgrounds. It improves maternal health, child health, girl education. Social capital such as self-help groups and cooperatives in India in the past has been a very successful model. The proof is that Government of India itself, when it introduced the National Rural Livelihood Mission, gave majority of funding to self-help group creation. Under the National Rural Livelihood Mission, the government wanted village women to create self-help groups for self-empowerment. Much later, the government said even to eradicate urban poverty under the National Urban Livelihood Mission, also we need to create self-help group among slum dwelling communities who can come together and start a small business like selling food or any other kind of vendoring or any other kind of, taxi service or whatever supports them. So you see, social capital sometimes can lead to economic outcomes. On that note, social capital does not only lead to economic empowerment. Now, please remember the question is not saying only economic empowerment. Empowerment is again a broad word. It is economic, political, social, cultural. Social capital, yes, through self-help groups and cooperatives, it leads to empowerment of economic kind. But what about political and social empowerment? That also happens. When these young women start self-help groups, they are able to come together and have a collective bargaining power. They become a pressure group. You may have heard of the word pressure group in GS paper 1 social issues. Pressure groups are small informal groups of people who, because they are together, they have solidarity. They can impact the political process, the legislative process of their district, city, village, whatever. These self-help groups over a period of time are such united in their agenda that women start supporting each other. These women then together create awareness about birth control, menstrual hygiene in the village and cities, vaccination awareness, child marriage, voicing against child marriage, domestic violence, alcoholism in the village. They go, they talk to the police, they lodge FIRs, they meet the panchayati, they meet the leaders of the local level panchayat bodies. They go and they raise a voice. They try to promote women well-being at the grassroots level. Well, that's the beauty of Indian democracy. Then these women also over a period of time sometimes are able to have links with political parties, with police. so that they take an action in their support tomorrow if these women were to face any kind of violence or any kind of systematic gender exploitation. Therefore, it empowers them politically and culturally also. Now, when a woman becomes empowered, a family is democratized. Now, in India, we have a long term tradition of patriarchy in families, especially in rural families. But when women begin earning, they have economic power, they earn their own livelihood, they have a collective group to support them, they have social capital. Then, patriarchy also is challenged. Issues like dowry, issues like wife beating, issues like forced pregnancies, issues like too much domestic burden of work can also be challenged through these mechanisms, and hence, social capital does not only lead to economic but also political, cultural, and social empowerment. For example, NABARD initiated the prospect of microfinancing the self-help groups. Later, it was also approved by the State Bank of India. Today, there are many private sector banks who also, under the aegis of World Bank, under the aegis of UNICEF, UNESCO, and all other international agencies, readily support the self-help groups. In the long run, it completely changes the face of gender equations in rural India. As of now, there have been so many successful models in India, such as I said, the Kutumbasri in Kerala. It's a large self-help group which employs not only thousands of women but also redefines the gender equation in the state. As I said, sometimes government makes welfare schemes for women. You and I might be aware that the government has made Ujjwala scheme to provide subsidized LPG gas cylinders to women below poverty line. You and I might be aware that the government has a scheme called Smile, meant for those women who are victims of abandonment or sexual trafficking. The government has another scheme called the Matritva Vandana scheme, Janani Suraksha Yojana. Okay, the government has schemes like Mahila Samman Nidhi. The government could have schemes like the Kiran scheme. You and I might be aware, but the people, the women who need this benefit at the ground level may not be aware. Again, self-help groups does wonders here. The ASHA workers who are working as the last mile health workers for rural women contact the self-help groups directly. Together, they help in promoting health access, vaccination access among the women. During the times of COVID pandemic, it was ASHA workers, Anganwadi workers, and self-help groups, through their social capital, changed the face of rural India's healthcare system. Similarly, it also strengthens women. It gives them the power through economic participation to tomorrow go ahead and stand for panchayati elections. Women find representation in panchayats already under the 73rd Amendment Act of Indian Constitution back in 1992, which created the concept of Panchayati Raj as the three-tier grassroots democracy level system in India. Today, Schedule 11th of the Constitution talks about it in detail. Under this, 1/3 seats in the panchayats are reserved for women. But rarely women participate in the panchayats. Why? Because of course there is patriarchy, there is caste system. But once the self-help group culture starts becoming strong, it is these women who then get the power, acknowledgement, and the courage and social capital to go and participate in the panchayat level. Now, one woman empowered means million others empowered. Why? Because it works on the concept of role model effect. One political leader in panchayat being a woman could mean majority of women's problems being addressed. It could mean cultural diffusion of empowerment. When one woman empowers herself, it leads to further a wave of awareness and empowerment in many others. Hence, yes, absolutely it is democratic. Absolutely, it's taking advantage of India's solidarity and cultural social capital. And this is the way it can promote empowerment. As I explained to you, not only economic, political, cultural, social as well. I think it was a very easy question. This is what you needed to do here. See, here is an example of Kutumbasri. If you would want to know more about it, you should definitely post a comment and we can bring back many more details about this. Overall, on a scale of 10, I would say easy question. I would rate it around 6.5 or 7. It was quite manageable. Now let's talk about question number 16, the second question from social justice. It's a lengthier one. It's 15 marks, 250 words. What's the question? Inequality in the ownership pattern of resources is one of the main causes of poverty. Discuss in the context of paradox of poverty. All right. On a scale of 10, I would again say 6.5 or 7. It's a direct question. Direct because there is nothing much to think about. We just have to discuss. Discuss means discuss various aspects related to it, negative, positive, everything. Keywords in the question, we need to identify them and then break the answer into IBC, introduction, body, conclusion. What do we do in the introduction? I think by now you know. Define the keywords, and then what do? We link them together. If we have a data, we provide the latest and the best data that we can have. Also remember, if you are quoting a data or if you are quoting somebody's quotation, then you must write the source. Source is very important because without source, the data makes no sense. Okay, nobody will trust your data. In case you do not remember the source and still you want to write the data, do it. But then just do not put the quotation marks. Don't mislead your examiner. That's all. Let's look at the question. What are the keywords then? Inequality. We know what is inequality, don't we? Lack of equality. Some kind of deprivation involved. Some kind of mismatch between the economic social status of different people in the society. A very simple example, class divide, caste divide, gender divide, political capital divide. Yes, these are inequalities where people do not have the same opportunities and access to various resources, goods and services. That's inequality, very easy. But please understand, inequality is not just economic. It can be social, cultural, religious, of every kind. For your UPSC exam, try to have a really broad set of mind. Try to have a very broad mind about all these big words like inequality, gender, and all of that. Because when you study society, social justice, or social issues, please understand that these are deep words which have a multiple meaning. Today, poverty is not poverty. It is multidimensional poverty. Today, gender is not a binary concept. Gender is an umbrella concept. Similarly, today, inequality is not just about you are rich and you are poor. No. Again, it boils down to various different inequalities a person can experience. Sometimes same person experiences 10 types of inequalities. Okay, so please understand these are broad words. So what is inequality? We know some kind of a discrepancy, a mismatch in economic, political, social status of people. What do you mean by ownership of resources? Ownership pattern. How are resources like land, money, social capital, political capital, all these, how are they owned by people in a society? What is the general trend? For example, if I talk about modern day Indian society, you will see such a confusing pattern of resource ownership. You can argue that those who have higher income, they have more resources. Have you ever understood that people who are poor today in India, according to the latest report by United Nations, this is a 2022 observation, just 3 years back. Out of every 6 multi-dimensionally poor people in India, 5 come from either scheduled tribe, scheduled caste, or OBC background. Does it not mean that inequality is not just about money? Resource ownership is not just about money. It has to do with many other criteria like caste, religion, and gender also. So the question says, inequality of ownership of resources is one of the main reasons behind poverty. Now, what kind of poverty? Please understand, income poverty is an obsolete concept. It is a historical concept. Today, we talk about multi-dimensional poverty. Discuss this in the context of paradox of poverty. Now, please understand what is a paradox. A paradox is a conflicting situation, an irony. It's an irony. It's a conflicting situation. Okay? Paradox of poverty. Try to think, what does it mean? If poverty means multiple kind of deprivations, paradox of poverty means what? that in a country, in a society where there is enough money, a society that has so many resources, and in that society also, there are people who are below poverty line. This is paradox of poverty. It's like an irony. A society that has money, that has a decent GDP, that has a good national income, where people are very rich. In the similar society, there are some who are multidimensionally poor. That is paradox of poverty. Just talk about it. So what's the problem? Let's start with the introduction. Define the keywords. Inequality refers to a mismatch, a discrepancy, or a gap among different communities and individuals based on income, social capital, or political power. Correct? Then, in Indian society, pattern of resources has been related to people's income, people's employment, people's place of residence, rural or urban, people's caste, and of course, gender. It is based on multiple criterias. This creates a paradox of poverty in Indian society. It comes from the fact that in India, although there is so much money, but the sad part is, according to a report by Oxfam, an international NGO, top 10% of Indian population owns about 70% of the entire resources of the country. Remaining 90% are living on mere 30%. That's called paradox of poverty. Okay, so this is what we need to talk about. Once you define a little bit inequality, you define that poverty is multidimensional poverty. Now, since afternoon I'm talking about multidimensional poverty, please read the Niti Aayog report on multidimensional poverty of 2024. You will get a very good picture of what is the situation in India right now. Let me quickly tell you that the concept of multidimensional poverty is quite a new one. It was initiated back in the 2021 by Oxford and United Nations Development Program. Okay, so Oxford University and United Nations Development Program gave us the concept of multidimensional poverty, where poverty is not measured in terms of your salary. It is measured on 12 indicators of life, which means sanitation, drinking water, schooling, primary health, banking account access, access to clean fuel like LPG or electricity or natural gas, all these together. Such 12 factors are combined and then your poverty level is calculated. The government of India says in just last 2 years, 13% people in India have successfully escaped multidimensional poverty, but the critics do not agree. That controversy is going. So right now, please define these words. You can give a great example in the introduction if you do not have a data. Either give the Oxfam data or any other data you have. Should you lack that, please use your current affairs knowledge. See, please understand that we do not read newspapers just to get an idea of what's happening around the world. Treat every newspaper session as a raw material for writing answers in your mails. Rarely will you get direct questions from the newspaper in the prelims. Hardly that happens. The beauty of newspaper reading and news analysis is to understand the concepts that we cover in the articles. You use them in your answers here. Very recently, one article in the Hindu said, in India, resource-rich states like Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh, who have rich minerals, rich jute, and many other beautiful resources, these suffer from a high level of multidimensional poverty, with Bihar topping the list in multidimensional poverty in it. Why? Because although resources are there, but there is a paradox of poverty, no? Distribution is very unequal. It is always the lower caste, it is always the women, the trans population, the disabled people, and the people who are into agriculture labor. They are the ones who are mostly deprived of all the richness, all the resources. So therefore, there is a huge disconnect between our national income and the number of people who are actually enjoying the benefits of that income. Paradox of poverty is all about unequal resource distribution. It's not a new thing in India. We inherited inequality because of colonial policies of development. The British created industries in India, yes, paper, textile, jute, cotton, but only in selected areas. The British created urbanization, yes, but only in Madras, Calcutta, and Bombay. The rest of the country was quite backward in terms of industrialization. The British gave jobs, yes, but to those who were the class of people who were educated in English, not those who were proficient in vernacular languages. Besides the caste divide that they created through census operations, besides the communalism that they created due to first partition of Bengal, then the 1858 Act that was passed, and then 1935 giving separate electorates to various categories like minorities, lower caste, Anglo-Indians. It is a colonial legacy. Today we are living that legacy. Therefore, some people have money, some don't. That's what the question wants you to answer. Now, whenever you are trying to conclude the question, make sure you write at least 1 or 2 points about how the problem can be sorted today. And how the problem will be sorted today? The problem will be sorted today by creating such a policy of industrialization and economic growth where people get equal share in resources. Gender empowering schemes, very important. National education policy, creating vocational skills among people, very important. Encouraging women to participate in Panchayati Raj institutions, yes, very important. Making sure that the welfare schemes, whether it's direct benefit transfer or whether it's empowerment scheme towards the lower caste population, again, quite important. Creating the concept of model villages in India, Adarsh Gram village, Pradhan Mantri Adarsh Gram. Create perfect villages with good infrastructure so that many others can learn from here. These are the ways to bridge inequality, whether it's urban, rural, whether it's gender, whether it's caste, whether it's religion. That's what the question demands from you, and then you can conclude your answer. Now let's proceed with question 17, and I know you will not like this question because this, by and far, was the most confusing question of social justice. On a scale of difficulty, I would say, rather on a scale of easiness, how easy was this? I would say 3 out of 10. Not because the question is tough, because to understand the question is very tough. For an aspirant who's struggling to finish the paper, the question wants us to critically evaluate. This question tag means critically give your opinion honestly about the good and the bad both, about the pros and the cons both. Evaluate, not just like a doctor evaluates you. Words like examine, words like evaluate. Evaluate means please pass a judgment. Critically evaluate means first try to see the pros and cons and then decide what is valid. Evaluate always means to judge. Please understand that. Look at the question. In contemporary development models, let's try to make it easy. Contemporary is modern day. Development is growth. In contemporary development models, patterns, policies, planning, in modern day development plans, decision making and problem solving responsibilities are not located close to the source of information and execution. Which means today in our modern day Indian society, the people who are responsible for making the decisions, parliament, state legislatures, panchayats, the legislative wing of the government, and those who are expected to execute these orders, like president, executive power, state governors. So both our legislature, our executive in our politics, these are the people who take all the decisions. Agreed? The parliament will pass the law, the president will sign the bill. State legislature will pass the bill. The governor may decide to say yes, the government may say no, the government may keep it waiting. Ultimately, who is the power here in India to make decisions? Either your legislature, parliament, either your executive, nominal head of the government. Nobody else is there. But the problem is that these are the people who are taking all the decisions and they decide how to solve all the problems. Where is the third party? Where is the common man? Where is the man on the ground? Where is the person who elected these legislatures? Where is that person here? Nowhere. This defeats the objective of development. Now, smartly try to understand the trap that UPSC is creating for you. When all the decisions are taken at executive and legislature, it means all the decisions are being taken at the central level. Did you understand that? Where are they being taken? At the central level. If all decisions are being taken at the central level, if all the decisions are centralized, then what is the concept of democracy, I'm asking you? Where is the third party involved here? Where is the common man that's involved in the process? Nowhere at all. That's the problem. That even today, despite Niti Aayog having been created in 2020, in 2014, in India, we still have the obsolete old concept of top to bottom planning. Still, we have failed to implement the most important word, which is referred to as cooperative federalism. The bottom to down planning. Planning that starts at the grassroots level and then it is shared among the various stakeholders. That's not happening. We are forcing the plans from top to the down. That's the question. So what do we need to answer? Our answer need to be such that it should be including the participation of the man on the ground. Okay, so let's begin. Introduction by using the keywords. What are the keywords here? Development model. Please understand, in India, what development model do we follow? The development model that we follow currently, despite the fact that we say we believe in federalism, decentralization, cooperative federalism, which is also known as marble cake federalism. You can use these good words here. Despite this happening in India, still the trend is to actually follow the top to bottom planning. Unfortunately, cooperative federalism has not been very successful. So define that. Say that in India, we further need to implement a kind of development plan where the objectives of development are met by the people on the ground through participation, through consensus, and through their active voice involvement. Otherwise, what's the purpose of having a democracy on the ground? Okay, so let's understand that development is most effective when it is done through the aspirations of the people who should be the beneficiaries of this development. If a poor person has no right to participate in city infrastructure, if he or she has no voice in how to do the city planning, then what's the point? You might put billions of dollars in a smart city, but then that is not going to help the person on the ground. Similarly, if you do a woman empowerment scheme, but you've never asked a woman, a rural woman, what exactly is the problem that she confronts in accessing primary health care, then what's the use of having super specialty hospitals? Will she be able to afford it? No. So therefore, in many modern societies like India, unfortunately, even today, majority of development plans, economic, social, cultural, political, they are centralized. Talking about the corporate private sector, they are centralized at the executive level of management. How many owners of multinational companies understand the problems faced by those workers who are working for their companies, but they come from unorganized work sector, like the vendor system work? They don't even know whether they are getting salary or not. Similarly, in our government sector, in the public sector, how many ministers are aware that under the Manrega scheme, whether the laborers received the salary or not, whether adequate online identification was done or not? Like recently in Bihar, what has happened? Thousands of migrant workers were not even mentioned in the voters list. Yes, the government is now conducting a special report of investigation, but how does that help? People were missed out. So this is the problem with centralized development model, that people on the ground are never really the beneficiaries because they don't participate. Okay, so this disconnect between executive and legislator making all the plans and forcing on the people, and the lower level people just becoming the victims and recipient of these plans. They are seen just as beneficiaries. They don't have any agency, it looks like. That's the real cause of disconnect, and this will never lead to any sustainable planning, by the way. For example, even let's talk about agriculture. The government may say that yes, the government is trying to provide drones under the drone Didi scheme to women farmers. How many of these women were actually able to learn how to operate the drone? Government is going for buying expensive machinery, artificial harvesters, mechanized drillers. Sounds very good. But do the women on ground know how to use them? They probably don't. The government is saying, yes, we have introduced PM Jan Arogya scheme, PM Ayushman Bharat scheme. But then how many of the real people with below the poverty line background have actually got these insurance cards prepared? Hardly any. Okay, so therefore, let the schemes be made at the legislator level. That's okay. That's what the parliament is for. But please make sure that execution is done with some dialogue, some participation of the local people. The government has to, through panchayats and through municipal corporations, go to slums, go to villages and do a proper survey of the real problems on ground. And accordingly, a plan should be funded rather than funding a major plan and then seeing what impact does it have on people. That doesn't make any sense. So today, let's not have a mismatch of priorities. Like, for example, the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. It was created for some states like Assam, but Assam is a very, very flood prone state. Same scheme was implemented in Rajasthan and Assam both. One is a desert, the other is probably most months of the year facing floods. How will the same scheme work for two extreme climatic conditions, two extreme topographies? It can't. Similarly, there are bureaucratic delays with centralized planning. So, what do we need? We need better implementation of a word called cooperative federalism. This is also called marble cake federalism. This was introduced in India after Niti Aayog came and stepped into the feet of the earlier Planning Commission of India. Niti Aayog, being a think tank, was meant to work on the basis of top decisions being governed by local participation, that is bottom to top planning, not top to bottom planning. This was the custodian of cooperative federalism. We need to endorse that. That's it. That's all the question wanted from you. Only if you could understand the question, it wasn't a difficult question. What's the solution now? Encourage, invigorate Panchayati Raj institutions and municipal corporations. Allow more women to participate. Make sure that the lower caste people are participating. Allow transgender participation, mobilize them. Similarly, create more representative institutions like Gram Sabha. Do social surveys and auditings to see which segment of people is missing. Also, create a kind of balancing through funding, functioning, and functionaries. Yes, the government will make a plan. Yes, the government will give money, but do not implement the plan unless people on the ground have given you inputs that what are their needs, and ask them how can those be fulfilled. That's all from my side for the social issues segment. And now back to Sir for the remaining discussion of the other questions. Okay.
Thank you so much, ma'am. So, hope you guys have enjoyed and loved the session with Soumya ma'am, and you guys have got a very holistic and in-depth understanding of those questions related to social justice. And now, guys, on board with us, we will be calling Vishal Gupta sir, who shall be throwing lights on some other questions as well. So after Vishal Gupta sir is done with his part, then I will be joining you guys with my part of the questions, and then finally it will be handed over to Karan Jindal sir. Okay, so over to you, Vishal sir. Please come and join us.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. So, good evening, students. So, welcome you all to today's paper discussion. So, you must have been attending the session for last 1 hour. So, now we'll discuss certain questions that specifically came from the polity segment, right? So, in today's paper, when I saw the paper, when I conducted the analysis of the paper, I was a bit happy. Now, students will wonder, why was I happy? So, the questions that have come in the examination today, generally, I was expecting such sort of questions, because most of the questions that have been asked, they are related to current affairs. They are somehow related to current affairs of polity section. For example, if we talk about pardoning, if the question has come on pardoning, the pardoning power of the President of India plus the comparison with the pardoning power of President of the great United States of America. I'm saying great just to mock them, right? So don't take it on your hurt, right? So when they talked about the comparison, or when they talk about the either similarities or differences between the pardoning power of President of India and USA, it is in the context of pardon that was granted by the former President of USA, Mr. Joe Biden, to his own son, Mr. Hunter Biden, right? So now you will be able to understand the context why current affairs are important. Why current affairs are important. So Mr. Biden granted pardon to his own son, and the concept of pardon, plus they try to link it with the Indian concept of, or the concept of pardon under the Indian Constitution. Secondly, we had elections to the Jammu and Kashmir State Assembly last year. So we had the elections to the Jammu and Kashmir State Assembly. Now in the polity paper, GS2, they have asked the functions or the sphere of authority of Jammu and Kashmir legislature. So it is directly connected to the elections that were conducted last year. So that's why, students, I always teach my students in my class that current affairs, they are basically the backbone of this examination. They are the cornerstone of this examination. You cannot excel in this examination by overlooking current affairs, because current affairs will be integrated in your questions. Current affairs will be integrated in your questions. They will try to formulate such a question in which a current affair is integrated, and they will try to link it with the static part. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say, right? So in today's class, or in today's session, I'll discuss 7 questions, and all of them are related to polity, Indian polity segment. So starting from the first question. Now this question has come from Representation of People Act 1951. Obviously, in India, we have 2 important pieces of legislation, Representation of People Act 1950 and Representation of People Act 1951, that basically governs the electoral system in India. I hope all of you have read them, or in brief, you must be aware of them. So Representation of People Act 1951. So it is a part of a syllabus. You cannot afford to leave it. Sometimes students only read for the purpose of polity, they read Lakshmikant. Now the thing here is, they have not restricted themselves to the conventional questions. They have gone into ask what is the meaning of correct practices. Now this question is directly coming from Representation of People Act 1951 and section number. Can anybody guess? Can anybody just put a crude guess? What was the number of section that they have asked? Corrupt practices. Section number 123 of the Representation of People Act. So that means you also have to take your examination syllabus seriously. And every point or every syllabus, every part of a syllabus, every topic of a syllabus is important. They have shown this. So Representation of People Act, section number 123, they have directly asked. So a student who has not read Representation of People Act, section 123, obviously do not have to read all the sections because it's a bulky law. Representation of People Act 1950 and 1951, they are bulky laws because they are governing the entire domain of elections in India. So that's why it is important to find out what kind of topics or what sort of topics are important for our syllabus. So now I'll discuss section 123 of Representation of People Act 1951. So students, directly under section 123, Representation of People Act, they have given the definition of corrupt practice. They have given the definition of corrupt practice. Now students, just see the question. They are saying, discuss the corrupt practices for the purpose of Representation of People Act 1951. Analyze whether the increase in assets of the legislators or their associates, legislator or their associate, disproportionate to their known sources of income, would constitute undue influence and consequently a corrupt practice. So student, in this case, the first point would be, you have to put down what is current practice under Representation of People Act. So you should have, in an introduction, you have talked about what is Representation of People Act. In a very brief manner, you should have given an introduction regarding Representation of People Act. It is an act that governs elections to the legislatures, whether central or the state. Secondly, corrupt practices. Then you should have mentioned section number 123. In the main body, you should have mentioned section number 123 under the Representation of People Act. It talks about corrupt practices and it punishes corrupt practices. So what are corrupt practices? See, a lot of corrupt practices have been mentioned under the term of corrupt practices. For example, bribery. The first thing that is mentioned is bribery. So you would have started with corrupt practices, then you have given sub points. The first practice is bribery. Now, all of you understand what is bribery. Even if you don't, if you have not read what is bribery in technical sense, bribery, all of you know, the bribery is a very common phenomena during elections time. All of you, yes or no? So that's why you would have mentioned corrupt practices under Representation of People Act. First, bribery. Obviously, when a candidate or his agent, tried to provide any sort of gratification to either electors or to any other candidate in return for their votes or in return for any sort of favor, that would be called as bribery. One. Secondly, another corrupt practice is promoting hatred between the people on the grounds of religion, race, caste, language. The thing which is quite often during the time of election. So it is also considered to be a corrupt practice. Second. Thirdly, most important thing what they have asked is undue influence. Now, third corrupt practice is undue influence. Undue influence. Now, what do we understand by undue influence? Undue influence means when any candidate to the election, or his agent, with his knowledge, they try to obstruct the exercise of electoral rights by the people. When they try to obstruct the exercise of electoral rights by the people. Now, how can they obstruct the exercise of electoral rights? For example, they can obstruct the casting of votes by the people. One. Secondly, they can also try to influence the people. People by any means. For example, if a candidate try to influence the people that do not vote for this particular candidate, or if you vote for this particular candidate, you will be ostracized from the community. That is also considered to be undue influence. So under the term of undue influence, a lot of offenses have been mentioned. So you should have mentioned what is undue influence. One. Then the question here is whether the increase in assets of legislators and their associates are disproportionate to their known sources of income would constitute undue influence. Now the answer here is, bacho, undue influence does not mean increase in the assets of the electors or increase in the assets of the legislators. Now this offense, this is a separate offense that would be a part of Prevention of Corruption Act, criminal misconduct. So there is something as criminal misconduct in Prevention of Corruption Act that says if any public servant, if he possesses property or assets greater than his known source of income, that would be considered to be criminal misconduct. But undue influence under Representation of People Act does not mention increase in the assets of the legislators. So if the assets of legislators have increased, so it would come under various or relevant sections of Prevention of Corruption Act, but not under Representation of People Act. So in this case, you would have clearly mentioned that increase in the assets of legislators or their associates disproportionate to the known source of income, it does not come under the definition of undue influence. So if it does not come under a definition of undue influence, that means it is not a corrupt practice under Representation of People Act. It is a corrupt practice. But under Prevention of Corruption Act. But it is not a corrupt practice under Representation of People Act. So this question required a deep knowledge of Section 123 of Representation of People Act. Students who do not have read Representation of People Act or what is a corrupt offense, they would not be able to attempt this question. So this is a technical question that they have asked because students generally do not read what is corrupt practices, what is undue influence, what is bribery. For example, in corrupt practices, there are multiple practices. I told you bribery. I told you undue influence. I told you even when an elector tried to portray his competitor in a negative light so as to affect his election prospect, that is also considered to be a corrupt practice. So the thing here is, if you have not read Section 123, you will not be able to answer this question as simple as that. So that's why, students, it is important that you cover each and every topic that has been part of your syllabus, and Representation of People Act has been part of your syllabus. Moving onwards, the second question. Again, this is a question which students do not expect, because it is a question on administrative tribunals. So generally we have Article 323A and 323B of the Constitution. We all know administrative tribunals were inserted, or the concept regarding administrative tribunals, it was inserted in the Constitution. through Article 323A. Now the thing here is they have asked comment on the need of administrative tribunals as compared to the court system. So there are two legs. One is the need of administrative tribunals. Why do we require administrative tribunals? What is the need of administrative tribunals? Why in this India or why in this country the parliament amended the constitution and brought in a separate concept of administrative tribunals? One. Secondly, assess the impact of recent tribunal reforms through rationalization of tribunals made in 2021. So it was basically talk about Tribunals Reform Act 2021. So this question consisted of two parts. One is administrative tribunals, the role played by them, why are they essential? Second is the Tribunal Reform Act that was enacted by the Parliament in 2021. So I'll discuss in a brief manner both of them. So one is the need of administrative tribunals as compared to the court system. So now students, what do we hereby understand by administrative tribunals? Generally, administrative tribunals, now what is tribunal? So tribunal is nothing but a special court. Tribunal is nothing but a specialized court that only deals with a specific kind of matters. For example, we have National Company Law Tribunal. For example, we have National Green Tribunal. So National Company Law Tribunal will only deal with cases related to company law. National Green Tribunal, it will only deal with cases related to environment. In the same manner, we have certain organization or institution in this country which is called as administrative tribunals. Now, what do administrative tribunal do? So we have a central administrative tribunal, one. Secondly, at the state level, we have state administrative tribunals. Central administrative tribunals and state administrative tribunals. Now, what are the functions of state and central administrative tribunals? The thing is, they take care of or they deal with all the service matters of public servants. Now, what do we hereby understand by service matters? Any matter related to recruitment, any matter related to condition of service, for example, their promotion, their salary, their tenure. So all of these service matters, or we can say disputes between the public servants, whether at the central level or the state level. Obviously, dispute at the central level or an officer, a government servant who is engaged with the central government, it will go to central administrative tribunal. And a public servant who is engaged with the state government, if there is any sort of service dispute or if there is any service matter, it will go to state administrative tribunal. So now, what does administrative tribunals do? Obviously, all the service matters. Suppose you are an IAS officer. You will be an IAS officer provided you put hard work, dedicated hard work. So suppose you are an IAS officer. Now there's a dispute regarding you and the department regarding promotion. Now, where do you file a suit or where do you file a petition? You will file an original application with the Central Administrative Tribunal. If you are engaged with the central government, or with the state administrative tribunal if you are engaged with the state government. So what does administrative tribunals do? They basically deal with service matters. So it's a specialized court, it's a specialized tribunal that deals with service matters between the government and the public servants, whether at the central level or at the state level. So now, earlier, these matters used to go to high courts. Before the enactment of Article 323A, these matters used to go to the high courts. So now, all of the service matters, now they are coming to administrative tribunal. So one thing, it has released the burden of the high courts. Now, high courts can take care of another matter. Special courts, special tribunals, administrative tribunals, they take care of the service matters. So one thing. Secondly, obviously, administrative tribunals consist of judicial members, plus it also consists of technical members. That means people who have served in the administration. So obviously, when a person who has himself served in the administration and he is sitting on the bench, So that means, suppose you are an IAS officer and there's a matter, service matter, you have not got your due promotion. Now you file a original application between the court, between the administrative tribunal. Now there will be a bench. Bench means there will be judges. So one would be a judge who is a judicial member, another would be a technical member who will be a person who has experience in administration, 15 years, 20 years, 25 years. Now the person who himself has run the administration, who has been the part of administration, he'll be able to deal with the matters effectively. So there will be a judicial members who will take care of the legal point of view. There would be a technical member who will put in his experience that he has earned during his service as an administrator. So that's why administrative tribunals, they have taken the load of judiciary or specifically the high courts, and they provide expertise. They provide expertise in resolving service matters. One thing. So this is the role that has been played by administrative tribunals since their establishment. Secondly, now the thing here is impact of recent tribunal reforms. I told you in 2021, the government or the parliament enacted a law. The name was Tribunal Reform Act 2021. So directly they've asked the question from Tribunal Reform. They have not mentioned it in the question. See how smart are they trying to play. They have not mentioned this in the question because they want to test your knowledge. They want to test your knowledge. You must know what is the Tribunal Reform Act 2021. So the government in 2021 brought in Tribunal Reform Act. And through this Tribunal Reform Act, the government took the powers of certain tribunals and gave it to the high courts again. Government took the power of certain tribunals and gave the power to the high court. That means in case of that matter, the matter will go to the high court rather than the specific tribunals. So Tribunal Reform Act, first of all, it has taken the power of certain tribunals. For example, tribunal that was established under the Cinematograph Act. So power of the power, judicial power is gone. The power is gone to high courts. One thing. So the government wanted to bring in this reform that the power of certain tribunals will be now vested in the high court. One. Secondly, now who will elect the members or who will appoint the members of these tribunals? So the act brought in a search cum selection committee. A search cum selection committee that consisted obviously a judge of a Supreme Court or CJI maybe, secretaries, that means the IAS officers, and the member of the tribunal itself. So now the thing here is, there will be a search cum selection committee that will recommend members who are to be appointed to the tribunals, to the government, and the government will appoint them. So the two major thing was that government merged certain tribunals. The government merged or government took the power of certain tribunals, for example, tribunals established under Cinematograph Act, and gave it to the high courts. So the existence of these tribunals, the existence have just gone, so they have just vanished. Secondly, the government established a search cum selection committee to recommend members to the government who will be appointed as, or recommend people to the government who will be appointed as the members of these tribunals. Two major reforms that have been brought in through this tribunal. Now the thing here is, the government is saying it is a reform because the government has brought in the act. But in actual, the Supreme Court has struck down the same ordinance. Supreme Court has struck down the same ordinance. That means the government, before bringing in the Tribunal Reform Act, the government has tried to bring in an ordinance on the same lines. The government has tried to bring in an ordinance on the same lines. Supreme Court has struck the ordinance. Supreme Court has struck down the ordinance. Why? Supreme Court said, one, the minimum age for a member is 50 years. Minimum age for a member is 50 years. One. So the member will not be left with much of the age to participate. Secondly, the search cum selection committee, it will consist of all the members or majorly the members of the government itself. So now they are appointing judicial members or members to the tribunal, but who is appointing? The government. So now judiciary said it will take away the power, it will take away the independence of these administrative tribunals, because nevertheless these tribunals are going to play the role of judiciary in respect to their specific domains. So the court has struck down this judgment, the court has struck down the ordinance, and the government again bring in that ordinance. So now in this case, UPSC was expecting you to conduct a holistic overview of the Act, Tribunal Reform Act. So there are certain pro points or there are certain positive points. That means, one, the tribunals under different legislations that have become redundant, they will be taken away and their power will be given to the High Court. One, that would be a reform. One. But a major drawback is that there will be political involvement in the working of the tribunals, because a search cum selection committee will now recommend to the government who will be appointed as the member of these tribunals. So there will be two different dimensions. One is the reforms that have been brought in. Second is the drawbacks or the increase in the political interference in the working of the tribunals. So there could have been three major parts. One is, again, the need of administrative tribunals. So you would have mentioned what was the need of administrative tribunals. They brought in specialization. They reduced the burden of the high courts. One. Then it's in the second part of the question, you would have explained the impact of administrative, or we can say Tribal Tribunals Reform Act. The impact of the Tribunals Reform Act. So I told you there is a one positive point. That means High courts will now preside over these tribunals. The drawback is in the government intervention, the political intervention in the working of the tribunals have increased. So you should have covered all these points, and believe me, if you would have touched all of these points, you would have got good marks in this question. Now moving on to the third part. This I was talking about. Compare and contrast the president power to pardon in India and in the USA. Are there any limits to it in both the countries? What is preemptive again? Again and again. It has come from the current affair. The context is current affair. I told you. In 2024, Joe Biden granted pardon to his own son, Mr. Hunter Biden. Yeah, the name of his son is Mr. Hunter Biden. Right? So he was facing certain charges, certain criminal charges, and the president gave him the pardon. See, nepotism at its peak. The president is granting pardon to its own son. If it would have happened in India, there would have been uproar. There would have been uproar and outrage. And that's obviously okay because we are a democracy. You cannot show favors to your own kith and kin, right? So now coming back to the question. So the pardon, president gave the pardon in 2024. Now UPSC asked the question. So in this question, we have to understand there are two things. First, we have to compare the pardoning power of Indian president and the USA president or the president of the USA. So Indian president also has the pardoning power. One, the president of USA also has the pardoning power, because not only Indian president or the American president, this trend of vesting pardoning power in the executive, it has been a long trend. So in UK also some sort of pardoning power is vested with the executive. Chalo, we'll leave UK, we'll come back to India and USA. Now in India, we have the president who has the power to grant pardons, right? So under Articles 72, we have the president who has the power to grant pardon. And under Article 2 of the US Constitution, the president of USA has the power to grant pardon. So this now will start the comparison. So one thing is, obviously both of them have the power to grant pardons. So they can pardon a sentence, they can commute a sentence, they can remit a sentence, they can grant reprieve, they can suspend the sentence, that all of you know. And the power of USA, or the power of pardoning of the pardoning power of the USA president is quite similar to Indian president. One thing. The major difference here is Indian president, it has to exercise its pardoning power on the aid and advice of Council of Ministers. On the aid and advice of Council of Ministers, president cannot exercise its personal satisfaction. That is the most important thing. He has to grant pardons on the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers, the Union Council of Ministers. One. But the president of USA, as he is the executive head. See, the difference here is, in India, president is just a ceremonial title or a head. In USA, the president is the real executive holder, or the real holder of the executive power. That's why when a president in USA is exercising the pardoning power, he is exercising according to his own personal satisfaction. In India, president cannot exercise his own personal satisfaction. It has to take advice from the Council of Ministers. One thing, the one major difference. I have told the similarities. Similarity in the power is that president can grant pardon, president of India can grant pardon, president of USA can also grant pardon. President of India can grant commutation of sentence, respite, reprieve. The president of USA can also do it. The difference here is Indian president, he will grant pardon of the aid and advice of Council of Ministers, but USA president, he will give or grant pardon on its own personal satisfaction. So that is the major point of difference between Indian president and the pardoning power of Indian president and the president of USA. So you would have, mentioned these differences and similarities in your answer. Now the second part of this question is, and secondly, limits. Now they are also asked limits. So one thing is, on the first part of the question, you will explain the pardoning power of Indian president and the USA president of the USA. Now they are asking about the limits. So what is the limit? I told you. The limit of the pardoning power of the Indian president is obviously one thing. He has to exercise it on the aid and advice of Council of Ministers. One. Right? So this is the major limit on the pardoning power of the president. Secondly, the power of Indian president, pardoning power, it is also subject to judicial review. Generally, court will not intervene, but it is also subject to judicial review by the court. And in USA also, the same is the matter. The pardoning power of the British USA president is also subject to the judicial review of the court of USA. One thing. But here, again, the major difference in president power and the president power of India, or the pardoning power of Indian president and USA president, is one. Indian president can grant pardon. Can grant pardon in case of death sentence. He can also pardon a death sentence. Right? Secondly, he can also grant pardon if the offense is committed against a union law. Right? In USA, the president of USA can only grant pardon with respect to any offense committed against the federal laws. So we all know in USA we have the federal laws. Federal laws mean the laws passed by the Parliament of or the Congress of the USA. And then we have the state laws. So the president of USA can only grant pardon with respect to offenses committed against federal laws, not against state laws. Not against state laws. But in India, suppose there is a state law and that is granting death penalty. That is providing provision for death penalty. So in India, for example, there's a state law and somebody has committed offense against the state law, and the person has been given death penalty. Now this death penalty can be pardoned or commuted by the president. So here the president is exercising his pardoning power even with respect to the state law that the president of USA cannot. Are you getting the difference or not? Right? So there are two major differences that I have mentioned. The third part of this question was limitations on the power. Limitations on the power. So the limitation on the power of Indian president is obviously he has to exercise his power on the aid and advice of Council of Ministers. Secondly, the president of USA, he cannot grant pardon in case of impeachment. This you can mention. He cannot grant pardon in case of impeachment. So these are major differences between the pardon power of Indian president and USA president. Now the question is, what is preemptive pardon? What is preemptive pardon? Now you must all of you must have heard the word preemptive. In Hindi it is called as agrim. Preemptive or agrim. Now what is preemptive? So preemptive generally means a thing that is done prior to occurrence of an event. So preemptive pardon means, so a person has not committed an offense. He has not committed an offense. No charges are framed against him in the court of law. What is pardon? A person is punished by the court of law. Then pardon is granted by the executive. That means the president. In case of preemptive pardon, a person has not even committed the offense. So when he has not committed the offense, there is no question of framing of charges. So he has not committed the offense, but still the president grants him preemptive pardon. It is not possible in India. So you can also put it in your difference that in India, we do not have the concept of preemptive pardon. Whereas in USA, we have this concept of preemptive pardon, where the president of USA, even before the commission of a crime, the president of USA can give pardon to any person. The president of USA can grant pardon to any person. So this is the major differences between, or first of all, this is the major concept of preemptive pardon. In USA, I'm again reiterating, in India, we do not have this concept of preemptive pardon, but in USA, we have. So the president of USA can grant a pardon to a person before he commits a crime, before he commits an offense, or before he commits a crime, right? In India, we don't have any of such concept. So in the first part of this question, you would have explained the pardoning power of Indian president and president of USA. Then you would have explained the similarities, then differences. Differences I told you, in the president will seek advice from Council of Ministers. President of USA does not have to. Secondly, Indian president can also grant pardon in case of death sentence, which is committed or which is given to a person who has committed an offense against a state law. But president of USA cannot, I'm again saying, cannot grant pardon in case of an offense which is committed against the state law. He can only grant pardon with respect to an offense which is committed against the federal or the central law. Okay? Then you would have explained in last paragraph what is preemptive pardon. Right? So with this, we'll move on to the fourth question, that is, discuss the nature of Jammu and Kashmir Legislative Assembly. Again, elections to Jammu and Kashmir Legislative Assembly 2024, you have this question. So that's why, bacho, current affairs, keeping a tab on current affairs linking the current affairs with your preparation with your static topics is very important. And that's what we do in StudyIQ. You must have seen the videos of our faculties that try to link in the topics that are in news, the current topics with the static topics. Even I do this. I teach law optional at StudyIQ. In law optional, this is what I do. On a daily basis, I make a video and I try to link the current topics with the static. And this is what they have done in this question. The election to Jammu and Kashmir Assembly happened in 2024, and they asked this question. Now they are asking what are the scope of authorities of Jammu and Kashmir Legislative Assembly? One thing. So in India, we all know we have a concept of federalism. Now I'm not going into the debate of what sort of federalism do we have, because this is not asking the question. I'm not touching that. I'm not even remotely touching that. One thing. Now in India, we have federalism. One thing. Now the thing here is, obviously federalism means the union will have a separate or distinct sphere of power. The state will have a distinct sphere of power. Now sphere of power generally means union will have certain legislative powers, executive powers, financial powers. Yes or no? In the same manner, the state will also have legislative powers, executive powers, and we can have the financial powers. Now the thing here is, J&K Reorganization Act, Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Act 2019. Now it has established two UTs. Jammu and Kashmir a separate union territory, Ladakh a separate union territory. Now Ladakh does not have an assembly, but Jammu and Kashmir was given a legislative assembly. Now the question is directly asking what is the scope of authority of the legislative assembly of Jammu and Kashmir. So now you will get, or you will have some sort of similarity. You will look at some sort of similarity with Delhi Legislative Assembly, because obviously Delhi, when India gained independence, Delhi till 1992 does not have, or did not have, sorry, a legislative assembly. It was granted legislative assembly by a constitutional amendment, right? So the thing here is, in Delhi we have legislative assembly. Elections happen after every 5 years, and we have the CM. In the same manner, now Jammu and Kashmir have a legislative assembly. Election happens, and they also have a CM, chief ministers. Now the thing here is that in Delhi, all of you must be aware that Delhi does not have a full statehood, because it is also UT, Jammu and Kashmir, it is also UT, but with the legislative assembly. The same case is with the Delhi, UT with the legislative assembly. So obviously there will be elections. There will be elections to Jammu and Kashmir, or Jammu and Kashmir Legislative Assembly. There will be elections to Delhi Legislative Assembly. Now the thing is, in Delhi, see, the thing here is, all the states have legislative powers. What, or we can say, what is the scope of legislative powers of state legislative assemblies? Obviously, they have the power to enact any law on state list and concurrent list in Schedule 7. They have the power to enact any law on any matter in state list or concurrent list in Schedule 7. In Delhi, the legislative assembly has the power to make any law on any matter in state list, provided they cannot make law on 3 aspects, or 3 subjects rather: police, land, public order. In the same manner, in Jammu and Kashmir, now I'm coming to the scope of authority of Jammu and Kashmir, Legislative Assembly, Jammu and Kashmir. So, Jammu and Kashmir Legislative Assembly, first of all, it cannot make law on the matter of police and public order. That means it can pass any law on any matter, on any subject that is given in state list, that is given in the state list in 7th schedule, provided it cannot make law on police and public order. So that means these subjects, they are still with the Lieutenant Governor of Jammu and Kashmir, the UT of the Jammu and Kashmir. So in Jammu and Kashmir, we have a Lieutenant Governor. So the power to make law or to take executive decisions on matter on police and public order, it is with the Lieutenant Governor. So obviously, so there is a history to Jammu and Kashmir, and unfortunately, there is violence in the history. Jammu and Kashmir has been a disturbed state. I'm not saying it is a disturbed state continuously, but still, sporadically, incidents of violence have happened in state of Jammu and Kashmir. So that's why the central government, as you all know, central government has the power. It has the power to convert a state into UT and to convert a UT into a state. So by exercising its power given under the constitution itself, now the central government wanted that Jammu and Kashmir shall be given a legislative assembly, so that the people will feel they also have democracy. They are voting, they are electing their representatives. So they will have a locally elected government, one thing. But as the condition in Jammu and Kashmir still stay disturbed, so there is always a possibility of violence. because there has been a certain history to state of Jammu and Kashmir. So that's why they took away the power of police and public order from the Jammu and Kashmir Legislative Assembly or the government, and they gave it to the Lieutenant Governor, who is the representative of the union or who is the representative of the central government. One. The major difference between any other state or any other state with having a legislative assembly and Jammu and Kashmir having a legislative assembly is Jammu and Kashmir Legislative Assembly can pass a law on any matter in state list, provided it cannot pass law on police and public order. Somewhere similar to Delhi. Second, in case of financial bills, the Legislative Assembly of Jammu and Kashmir or Legislative Assembly of Jammu and Kashmir on a financial bill can only be presented on the recommendation of Lieutenant Governor. So any law that is imposing any tax in Jammu and Kashmir or any law that is authorizing taking out of money from the consolidated fund of Jammu and Kashmir, the bill cannot be brought in by the state government alone. The state government will seek recommendation from the Lieutenant Governor, and after receiving the recommendation, the bill will be introduced. That means, again, the state of Jammu and Kashmir also does not have complete independence on financial matters. So this is the scope of authority. This is the scope of authority, right? This is the scope of the authority, right? So now here in Jammu and Kashmir, the government or the Legislative Assembly cannot pass law on a subject of police and public order. Secondly, it does not have complete independence, financial power. It cannot pass a financial law. It needs the recommendation of the Jammu and Kashmir Lieutenant Governor. So these are the major differences. Apart from that, Legislative of Jammu and Kashmir, it can make any law on any subject in state list as well as concurrent list. But in case of obviously repugnance between the central law and the state law, obviously the central law will prevail. This is the same condition with any other state. So this is not a major difference. The two major difference I have already told you. So Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Act, again I am repeating, it created two UTs, two union territories out of the former state of Jammu and Kashmir. Jammu and Kashmir a separate UT, Ladakh a separate UT. Ladakh does not have a legislative assembly. Jammu and Kashmir was given a legislative assembly, but the powers were somehow curtailed. The powers were somehow curtailed as similar to the state or the UT of Delhi, right? So this was, so that is the scope of the question that has been asked. Discuss the nature of Jammu and Kashmir Legislative Assembly after the Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Act. One thing. So you would have mentioned all these things, right? Briefly discuss the powers and function of assembly of the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. So you would have discussed that they have all the they have legislative powers. Obviously, they can make law on any subject on or given in state list, provided they cannot make law on police and public order. Secondly, they do not have independent financial power under Section 36 of Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Act. So you could have, because obviously the question was of worth 150 words, so you could have mentioned all of these things in a brief manner by making points. And one thing important is students learn to make points. See, examiner, when he's looking at your paper, so believe me, there is one practical point. See, examiner has a lot of answer sheets to check. He has a lot of answers. You have to write only one answer sheet. He has to check hundreds of answer sheets. So now the thing here is, if you make your answer presentable, if the examiner, just by looking at your answer, is able to identify that these are the major points that you have highlighted. So this is the structure that you have adopted. And in the structure, these are the major points that you are highlighting. So he'll be able to gauge. That whether have you understood the question of whether have you understood the content of the question or not. Are you going on the right direction? Are you going to the right direction? So by just looking at your paper, the first impression that he might get or he shall get is, yes, the student has understood the context of the question. And that's how you give marks. That's how you earn marks, right? So one thing is, making of points is very important. Highlighting the important points is very important. Highlighting section numbers, especially in case of polity, very important. So when you are giving your opinion, in any answer, when you're giving your opinion, the opinion must be backed by facts. Opinion must be backed by facts. If you're not quoting facts, if you're not quoting substantial facts, or we can say something that will serve as an evidence, there is no purpose of giving opinions. So when you're giving opinions, make sure you back it with any sort of fact, right? So I have discussed the nature of Jammu and Kashmir Legislative Assembly. I'm again reiterating the powers and functions of Jammu and Kashmir Legislative Assembly. It is quite similar to Legislative Assembly of any other state. But in two aspects, the power have been severely curtailed. One is it cannot make a law on the subject of police and public order. Secondly, it does not have complete independence in passing of the financial bills. The bills that authorize imposition of tax. The bills that authorize taking out of money from consolidated fund of the state or UT of Jammu and Kashmir. In rest of the scenarios, the state of, or we can say the UT of Jammu and Kashmir, have the same power as compared to any other state. Moving on to the next question. Attorney General. Now the question is on Attorney General, the legal officer, my favorite domain, Attorney General of India. So now Article 76, they have directly asked the question. Attorney General of India plays a crucial role in guiding the legal framework of the union government and ensuring sound governance through legal counsel. Discusses responsibilities, rights. Now, where are the keywords? Responsibilities, rights, limitations. So beta, you have to adhere to the keywords. What they are asking? They have asked rights, limitations, and responsibilities. So you have to cater to these keywords. If you skip any of the keywords, obviously you will lose marks, right? So they're asking, now it is a statement. It is a statement that is basically elucidating the role of Attorney General of India. Obviously, we all know, as per Article 76 of the Constitution, Attorney General, he is the topmost legal officer of the government of India. So as any organization or sometimes individual will require a legal officer. If you have to file a case, if you have to file a suit in a court of law, if you have to file a petition in a court of law, if you have to file an application in a court of law, obviously you require a legal officer. In the same manner, the government also require a legal officer. And that legal officer is called as Attorney General of India, right? Please write down on the chat, who is the present Attorney General of India? I want to know. How many of you know what is the name of present Attorney General of India? So now Attorney General of India, his responsibilities is one. I'm just briefly enumerating the responsibilities of Attorney General of India. One, his responsibility is, obviously, he provides legal advice to any point of law or any question of law that is referred to him by the president or the government. So if a government or president refers any legal point of view, any question of law to Attorney General of India, it is the duty of Attorney General of India to give its response, give his response. Secondly, again, if the government seeks advice from Attorney General of India on any legal framework or any on the legal framework with respect to any law or any matter, Attorney General will provide his advice. And Attorney General will provide his advice. Right? Very good. Thirdly, he appears on the behalf of Government of India in a court of law. His responsibility is, obviously, when he is a legal officer, when he is an advocate of the government, so obviously he has to appear on the behalf of the government in a court of law. So in a court of law, if the government is a party, party does not mean the party with respect to what we enjoy. Party means that the government is a party to a suit or a petition. Attorney General of India will represent the Government of India. That means he will be the legal officer of Government of India with respect to court of law. So these are the primary responsibilities that he has to perform. He will advise the Government of India on any question related to law. He will advise the Government of India with respect to any question of legal framework. Thirdly, he will appear on the behalf of Government of India in courts of law. Major thing. So these are the responsibilities that he has to perform. Now the question is, what are the rights available to him? Can somebody tell me what are the rights that are available to Attorney General of India? So the thing here is, he being the topmost law officer and the post being a constitutional post, obviously it is mentioned in the Constitution itself. So that's why it's a constitutional post. Now, Attorney General of India has certain rights. One, he gets precedence in matter of hearing before any court. Before any court, he gets precedence in hearing. Right? So if there is a matter that is existing before a court of law, and if there is Attorney General of India, so he will get precedence. He will get precedence over every other advocate. One thing. This is the right that is available to Attorney General of India. One. Secondly, he also has a right to attend the meetings of the parliament, either house. Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha. If he wants to attend the meetings of the parliament, he can attend. He can also take part in the deliberations. He cannot vote. That's a different thing because he's, after all, not a member of parliament, so he cannot vote. But he can take part in the meetings. One, he can also take part in deliberations of the committees of the parliament. So this is the right that is vested in the office of Attorney General of India by the Constitution itself. Right? So these are major rights that are available to Attorney General of India. Now the thing is limitations. So when he is holding such a responsible position, he is having rights, he has responsibilities to perform. So now there will also be certain limitations. Now what are the limitations? The limitations are imposed upon the Attorney General of India so as to ensure that there is no conflict of interest between his role as a law officer of the state and his role as a private advocate. Because after all, he is an advocate. Sorry. So the limitations are, there are certain set of limitations. Now, one thing is, Attorney General of India cannot hold a brief against the Government of India. That means he cannot act in any court or plead in any court against the Government of India itself. Because he is a counsel of Government of India. Sarkar ka vakil hai na beta wo. So he is a counsel of Government of India, so he cannot go against the Government of India in any court. So he will not hold a brief, or that means he cannot act as an advocate against Government of India in any court. One thing, that is the major limitation. One. Second major limitation, he cannot indulge in litigation without taking permission from the Government of India. So now, he being an advocate, he can be tempted to indulge in litigation outside his office. For example, now suppose he's getting a client. Now the client is paying him handsome amount of fee. Now he being a human and he being an advocate, he will be tempted. He will be tempted to take the offer, but he cannot indulge in any sort of litigation, especially the criminal litigation, without taking approval from the Government of India. If he has to indulge in any sort of private litigation, first of all, he has to take approval from the Government of India. So this was an easy question. It was a low-hanging fruit, I think, because all of you must be aware of obviously he's the Attorney General of India. He's holding a constitutional position. One, there are certain responsibilities. I told you, he provides legal advice to the government. He obviously advises the government on any question of law. He appears for the government in any court of law. So that is his responsibilities. Secondly, rights. Obviously, he gets preference or precedence in any court of law, in any matter of hearing. Secondly, he can participate in the proceedings of the parliament, any house of the parliament or their committee. Limitations, he cannot act against the government. He cannot plead in any court of law against the government itself, because obviously he is a law officer of government first. Secondly, if you want to indulge in private litigation or criminal litigation out of his office or out of his duties, rather, he has to seek approval from the government. Right? So these are rights, duties, responsibilities, and limitations of Attorney General. So you would have mentioned all of these by making points, and if you have made points by quoting different sections or articles, rather, because in Constitution we have articles, in different laws we have sections. So if you have quoted appropriate articles along with all these points, you would have got good marks. Now moving on. Question number 12. Again, a low-hanging fruit. So directly they have put the question from your polity, any sort of book that would be referring, amendment of the Constitution. So they're asking amendment of the Constitution. See, they're simply asking what is the procedure for amendment. Secondly, what is the limitation on the amending power? As simple as that. As simple as that. A student who has just begun his preparation, and if he has read polity, so he'll be able to answer this question. Nothing difficult, a direct question. They're asking what is the scope of limitation, either procedural or substantive, on the parliament, on the amending power of the parliament. So obviously we all know Constitution is not a rigid document. It's a very flexible document, because obviously it's a law, and law has to be changed according to the requirement of the time. A law can never be fixed. It needs to be agile. It cannot be rigid, because law is basically enacted or formulated to cater to the needs of the society. So when the social dynamics, when the political dynamics, when the economic dynamics or any other thing is changing, it is in phase of transience. So obviously law also has to adapt itself. So that's why our constitution forefathers, they were so they were the people with so keen foresight, so they incorporated these provisions regarding amendment in the constitution itself. One thing. Now secondly, the question is ki obviously we all know article 368, everybody would be aware of that, right? So article 368 provides the procedure for the amendment of the constitution. So there has been a plethora of litigation when they were litigating or when they were contending whether the parliament has the power to amend the constitution or not. Now the Supreme Court debated for 20 years. The Supreme Court debated for 23 years whether the parliament has the power to amend the constitution or not. In one judgment, it is saying it has the power. In another judgment, it is reversing its earlier position and saying that the parliament does not have the power to amend the constitution. So I do not want to get into all of these litigations or cases, but I'll tell you the nature of the question that they've asked. So they are generally saying, easy question. Indian constitution has conferred the amending power on the ordinary legislative institutions with a few procedural hurdles. In the view of this statement, examine the procedural and substantive limitations. See, they're asking about the limitations. That means Parliament has the power to amend the constitution. There is no doubt about that. And this has been categorically clarified by the Supreme Court in the case of Keshavanand Bharati versus State of Kerala. Specifically, they have stated Parliament has the power to amend the constitution. There is no doubt regarding that, right? So all this uproar regarding the power of the Parliament to amend the constitution, it started from Shankari Prasad case. So you have the Shankari Prasad case, then you have Sajjan Singh case, then you have IC Golaknath case, then you have this Keshavanand Bharati case. Again, after you have this Indira Gandhi versus Raj Narayan case, then you have this Vaman Rao case. So there has been series of litigation, series of cases. So we'll not get into those cases, but we all know in Keshavanand Bharati versus State of Kerala, 1973, Supreme Court has categorically stated that that the Parliament under Article 368, it has the power to amend the Constitution. It has the power to amend the Constitution. And Article 368 provides both the power and the procedure to amend the Constitution. But there are certain limitations. Now, what are those limitations? One. So the thing is, there are procedural limitations are itself mentioned in Article 368. Procedural limitations are themselves mentioned in Article 368. Now, what are those procedural limitations? We all know in our Constitution, there are three types of provisions. I'm saying three types of provision, three category of provisions, if I'm talking in the context of amendment. So there are certain provisions that can be easily amended. So there are certain provisions that were temporary, transient in nature. For example, the number of judges of the Supreme Court. Obviously, when the Supreme Court was constituted or established, the number of judges were 7. Now, obviously, when the population will increase, the litigation will increase. When the litigation will increase, obviously, you will require more judges. You cannot handle all the work with 7 judges because now Supreme Court, I also started complaining, we are facing huge overload of cases. So the provision in the Constitution, for example, the number of judges. Now this number has to be amended. So obviously Constitution has to be amended. It can be done by simple amendment. There is no need of special majority. It can be done by ordinary amendment. It can be done by amendment by simple majority by both the houses of the Parliament plus approval by the President, which he generally gives in case of Constitution Amendment Bill, right? So there are certain provisions in the Constitution that can be very easily amended because these provisions, either they generally talk about the power of the union government or they generally talk about those provisions that were temporary in nature. So they can be easily amended. Now there are certain provisions in the Constitution that need to be amended. So that means these provisions shall also be flexible, but at the same time, they shall not be so flexible that can be easily amended by every government. So that's why there is a rigid procedure comparatively. Now the second type of provisions are, for example, if the government want to or if the Parliament want to amend any provision of fundamental rights, DPSP. Now they have to take to the second method. Second method is obviously they have to introduce a bill in the Parliament, Constitutional Amendment Bill, any house, Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha. It has to be passed by both the houses of the Parliament, but with special majority. Now this special majority is one limitation. Special majority is one limitation. Obviously, government needs to the majority of total membership of the House plus 2/3 of the members present and voting. Now you require this majority. So this is one limitation, procedural limitation. Now, the third type of provisions. The third type of provisions are, they're also called as entrenched provisions. They're also called as entrenched provisions. Now, these provisions, they generally talk about the federal structure. They generally pertain to the federal structure of this country. Now, for example, seventh schedule. Seventh schedule, obviously, it delineates the legislative power of the union and the state. So, obviously, it is also talking about the power of the union and power of the states. One. The process of election of the president. Obviously, in election of president, the union is also involved, the states are also involved, because the MLA is also part of the electoral college. So now, like that, we have multiple provisions in the constitution, and that is given in Article 368 itself, that talk about the power of the union and the state. They talk about the powers of the union and the states, right? So now, as we know that the constitution can only be amended by the parliament itself. So now the thing is, when the parliament, obviously that means the union government, though it is the government which initiates the legislation or which initiates the legislative making process in the parliament itself. So now, if the power to amend the parliament, it is given to the union. So now, if there was no limitation on the power of the union, it could have amended those provisions that gives power to the states. Yes or no? Obviously, there is always a tussle. A tussle always goes on between the union and the states. All of them, or both of them, want to appropriate more powers. So if the power to amend the parliament, the constitution is given to the unions, obviously it was important that some sort of limitation shall be imposed so that they cannot take away the powers of the states by amending the constitution itself. So that's why those provisions of the constitution that are called as entrenched provision, those provisions that talk about the powers, division of power between the central and the states in any manner whatsoever. So those provisions can only be amended by taking ratification or approval from the states itself. If you are touching the power of state government, obviously you need to consult them or you need to take their approval, right? So now in this case, there are certain provisions in the constitution, for example, Article 368, 7th schedule of the constitution, right? Allocation of seats, right, to the states in Rajya Sabha. Now, if these provisions have to be amended, a bill has to be introduced in the parliament. Obviously, both the houses will pass the bill with special majority. Now, the bill will go to at least all the states, or it will go to the states, and it has to be ratified by at least half of the states. So that means if half of the states ratify the bill, only then the bill can be passed and it can be taken to the president for its approval. So now this procedural limitation, you require passing of a bill, constitutional amendment bill, from the parliament by special majority plus ratification by half of the states is also required. So now this limitation forms the procedural limitation. One thing, it forms the procedural limitation, right? So it forms the procedural limitation, one thing. Now, secondly, now they're moving on to the substantive limitations. Substantive limitations. Now, what do we mean by substantive limitations? I have discussed the procedural limitation. That means there's a proper procedure that the parliament has to follow while amending the constitution itself. That has been given in Article 368 itself. Now, there are also substantive limitations. That means, and that has been clarified. It has been clarified by the Supreme Court in Keshwanan Bharti itself. I told you, Supreme Court said in Keshwanan Bharti that the parliament do have the power. The parliament does possess the power to amend the constitution. But as constitution is the fundamental law of the land, it is a fundamental law of the land. So there is certain provision or there are certain policy behind the constitution. Now the government cannot go on changing the constitution itself. Court said, and mind my words, you can use these words in this answer if you ever come across this question again. Court said amendment of the constitution means bringing in minor changes here and there. Court said amendment of the constitution means bringing in minor changes here and there. Amendment does not mean that you alter the constitution in such a manner that it loses its identity forever. Again, I'm saying the court said in Keshan Bhati versus State of Kerala, amendment means bringing in minor changes here and there. Bringing in minor changes in the constitution here and there. Amendment does not mean that you amend the provision of the constitution in such a manner that it loses its fundamental identity. So the court said every constitution has a fundamental identity. Now, what is that fundamental identity? Fundamental identity means certain important provisions of the constitution that form the framework of the constitution. Now, what are those? Rule of law in India, secularism, federalism, division of power, separation of power, now equality before law. Now, all of these principles form the identity of the constitution. These are the principles that you can find, or you can find them embodied in different articles of the constitution. So the court said, if the government changes or remove these provisions, it would be like taking the soul of the constitution out. It would not be amendment, it would be altering the constitution itself. So that's why Parliament does possess the power to amend the constitution, one, but it cannot amend the constitution in such a manner so as to take away its fundamental identity. Now, what is identity? The provisions that I talked about. So the court said, yes, the Parliament does have the power to amend the constitution, but it cannot amend these fundamental provisions, and court gave it the name of basic structure. So the court brought in the doctrine of basic structure so as to protect certain provisions of the constitution that forms the basic principle, underlying principle of the constitution itself. For example, rule of law. For example, equality before law. For example, separation of power. For example, federalism. For example, division of power. For example, independence of judiciary itself. So the court said in Keshan Bhati versus State of Kerala, 1973, that the Parliament can amend the constitution, but it cannot amend those provisions that form the part of basic structure. Now, what is basic structure? What are the provisions? What are the specific provisions that form the part of basic structure? The court said it will be defined in a matter of time. So the court gave example of certain provisions, and court said with coming litigation, in coming years, so obviously we'll come across litigation. So in those cases, in that litigation, we will enumerate what are the principles, or we can say the basic principles or the basic structure of the constitution. So here in this case, in this question, you have to mention the procedural limitation that is mentioned in Article 368 plus the doctrine of basic structure. So this question have been attempted in this manner. Now moving on to the last question that I will discuss today, question number 15. Question number 15. Now here it is asking, what are the environmental pressure groups? Discuss their role in raising awareness, influencing policies, and advocating for environmental protection in India. Now, they are talking about environmental pressure groups, right? They have also asked about civil society organization in a separate question. Now they are asking about environmental pressure groups. Now the thing is, what are environmental pressure groups? I'll give you an example, then you tell me. You'll be able to understand what are environmental pressure groups. In Rajasthan, there was a district. In that district, there was a factory that was operating. So it was producing certain chemicals, or it was producing certain toxic chemicals. And because of that, because the industry was producing so much of toxic chemicals, so much of toxic effluents, that the entire area in the vicinity of the industry, it became barren. So obviously, it would have impacted the fertility of that particular area. Area became barren, plus the water bodies that were present in the near vicinity, the water became toxic there. So now in this case, because the people were so illiterate, I'm not denigrating them, but that is the reality of the case, right? I'm not at all denigrating them. We are few privileged people who have got the opportunity to educate ourselves. And believe me, this is not a small opportunity. This is not a small opportunity. A lot of people in this country never got this opportunity to educate themselves. We were few privileged people. I'm not saying me myself, you also. We were few privileged people that got this opportunity, right? So Rajasthan, the people were illiterate. They could not fathom what to do now. The entire land has become barren. The water bodies, they become toxic. Now what to do? So these people they used to survive on agricultural land. Agricultural land has become barren. Now these people used to survive on water bodies for fulfilling their water requirements. The water has become toxic. Now where to go? Where to go? Now there was an organization, Indian Council for Enviro Legal Action. Indian Council for Enviro Legal Action, it initiated a public interest litigation in a Supreme Court. Now, Supreme Court, in this case, it analyzed the sort of impact that the industry was having on the areas that were in the vicinity of the industry. So the Supreme Court said, in this case, it is the responsibility of the industry to clean all the area. First of all, you have to stop operating the industry, one thing. And because of you, land has become barren, water bodies have become toxic. So now it is the responsibility of the industry that is polluting all the area to clean it, to restore it, and to go for restitution. So now, in this case, tell me, who was responsible, who played a primary role in initiating this litigation? Obviously, it was the organization. It was nothing but it was a, we can say, environmental pressure group. It was nothing but environmental pressure group. So now, by hearing or by reading this case, you must have acknowledged, or you must be able to understand how these groups, environmental pressure groups, or we can also say civil society organizations, how do they take up the matter of environmental degradation? How do they take up the matter of environmental degradation? How do they take up the matter of restitution of environment? So you can use this case in your answer, and then you can enumerate the role played by environmental pressure groups. Obviously, first of all, they create awareness among the people. Sometimes people are not even aware of the kind of pollution they're about to face or that they're facing, because even today, a significant population of this country is illiterate. They know how to read and write, but different aspects of life they're not even aware of, they're not even exposed to. So these environmental pressure groups, first of all, they educate the people, they conduct mass campaigns. You can write all of these points in your answers. So they conduct mass campaigns, they educate the people, they raise awareness among the people. One thing. Secondly, influencing policies. So now, when they campaign for the restoration of environment, when they campaign to stop or to prevent the environmental damage, obviously, when this campaign gathers a certain mass, certain critical mass, obviously, it influences the government, as it influenced the Supreme Court. So now these environmental pressure groups, first of all, they perform the basic role of educating people. That is the basic thing. The people get educated. Secondly, they also perform, or they also carry on the campaigns regarding protection of environment. I'm again telling you one more example. So there was a very important case. There was a span model case. I'm giving these examples to make you understand how these groups work, how they bring in, or how they contribute to bring in impact with respect to environment matters. So there was a group. So there was a certain group. There was a case called a span model case. In Himachal, the government has allotted land to a company that was building a motel. Now it was a land that was in vicinity of a Beas River. Now hotel was constructed. Obviously, heavy equipment was brought in. Now the equipment, obviously, it carried on all this earth moving jobs. Because of that, it impacted the river course of Beas River. And because of that, the Beas River, the flood situation got aggravated. People lost their property. Some people lost their lives. So now, even a newspaper headline. So newspaper put this headline, newspaper pressed this news, and Supreme Court got the cognizance. That something fishy is happening in Himachal Pradesh, and because of greed of few people are suffering. So now, in this case, this news item, it has acted as a environmental pressure group, and it motivated the Supreme Court to take cognizance of that particular matter. And Supreme Court, obviously, it imposed penalty on the group, which has resulted in degradation of the environment. So now this environment pressure groups, obviously, they raise awareness among the people. One thing, you can make this a point. Secondly, they also conduct campaign at state and national levels. So when they conduct campaign at state and national level, and you can take any of the example that you have come across during your study. Okay, you can take any example that you have come across. For example, you must have heard about the name of Medha Patkar. So Medha Patkar, she was instrumental in this. She was instrumental in organizing this campaign against this Sardar Sarovar Dam. So you can mention this example in your answer, right? You can mention this example in your answer, right? So you have this Sardar Sarovar Dam case, Medha Patkar case. Then you have this span model case, Union Council for Environmental Legal Action case. In all these cases, non-state actors, environmental groups, they have campaigned for restoration of environment. They have campaigned for protection of environment. So you can use these cases in your answer. You can use this to substantiate your line of argument. You can use this to substantiate your suggestions. So with this, I will hand over the class or hand over the discussion to our esteemed faculty, Mr. Karan sir. So I have conducted discussion with respect to 7 questions, and ma'am have conducted discussion with respect to, I think, 3 or 4 questions. So now over to you, sir. So please share your insights with the students and guide them.
Thank you. Thank you,
Okay,
sir.
sir.
Thank you for your guidance to the students, sir. So we'll definitely remember your legal expertise for this, and that is much needed for, in fact, the GS students, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Okay. So how are you people? कैसी चल रही discussion? मजा आ रहा है? So are you enjoying it, right? ठीक है जी. So I have been given this portion of 18th, 19th and 20th question. So firstly, I would like to say you the paper which appears very easy because it is relating to the static part of the thing. But when you start writing the question, you suddenly discover that you have less information with you. So that is the paradox of this paper. They are very easy on the face of it. And some questions are indeed easy. I would not be parting away from that. For example, that amendment of the constitution, the parliamentary role in that is quite, there are certain kind of these questions. For example, also about the US constitution and the Indian constitution comparison, not regarding the pardoning power of the president, otherwise the next question one. But there are questions when you fall short of information, you will be just imagining that I'm studying for 2 years, 1.5 years, I'm studying for 3 years. I have written 2-3 mains answers, 2-3 mains, and still I'm falling short of information. So yes, that feeling is correct. Mind you, that feeling is correct. I would not give you any false or any filtered response from here, right? Please keep that in mind. Okay. So 18th question, that is, National Commission for Protection of Child Rights has to address the challenges faced by children in the digital area, examine the existing policies, and suggest also the measures the Commission can initiate to tackle the issue. So digital challenges you also face. I think I've also faced. Maybe I'm not a child right now, but yes, we have faced, and we also see our siblings, our cousins facing that. The digital challenges. Firstly, always try. Let me give you a golden mantra, bache. Let me give you a golden mantra. Always try to read the question twice. I know you know many things, but please be relevant. One problem which the candidates face when they do not get enough marks in the mains paper is their answers get irrelevant. You tend to write what you know. You do not write what is being asked in the question. National Commission for Protection of Child Rights has to address the challenges faced by the children in the digital era. So saying CR has to. Has to. Is it written in their mandate? Firstly, firstly see what is their mandate. Then examine the existing policies which are going on in the country and also suggest the measures. So suggesting measures is the difficult part in this question, which I would really like to say. Regarding the suggestion of the measures is the difficult part in this question. That is important, bache. That is important. This you can tackle. Okay. So let us start. Let us try to answer this one. So what I would write? I would write up again National Commission for Protection of Child Rights. Their act, that is Protection of Child Rights Act. Protection of Child Rights Act. You have to mention about that, right? Don't write about their composition, who is the chairman, who are the members. That is not being asked. That is not being asked. And whom we define as a child. Under this act, children up to this years of age, they are given protection. They are given protection. And regarding what is being asked next up, they are saying they have to address the challenges. So write something about them, that NCPCR, they are doing work for the children rights, for the children rights. And you might be knowing about that Justice Juvenile Act 2015. It was given such shape up on account of so much efforts and the undertakings which were taken by the NCPCR Commission, right? They took up efforts. Now we have to go to the digital challenges. So what are the digital challenges for the children? Firstly, there is a problem of privacy. right? Privacy is a problem because the children are not aware of. There's also a problem of cyberbullying. You see, cyberbullying is there, right? There is blackmailing, cyberbullying. These kind of problems are there. Yes or no? You encounter these challenges as children. There is lack of access, I would say, or there is digital divide as well. There is digital divide as well, which actually prompts other problems. Try to talk about the problems. Give the checker what do you understand by the digital problems or the digital era problems faced by the children. You might be facing other problems also on a digital level. Try to write them out. Try to write them out like these. Try to give them the points like on a digital level we have these kind of information, we have these kind of challenges. You also have, that is cyberbullying. You also have problems like phishing, right? You also have problems like phishing. You have cyber theft also. You have these kind of problems, right? There's a problem like DOS attack and all these things go on. Just write 4 points. Enough. 4 points would be enough here. Telling you from experience, 4 points would be enough, right? After you end up writing them. So now you tell how NCPCR has given its contribution to the protection of children. Firstly, write about the JJ Act, Justice Juvenile Act 2015. How NCPCR has contributed to this act and how they protect children. How they protect children, right? Try to answer about it. And after that, the JJ Act of 2015, then move on to the other one, that is your POSCO Act. POSCO Act of 2012. That is Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act. And in this, if you are trying to bully the child, you are trying to sexually abuse the child, even on a digital level, NCPCR is fighting so many cases in different courts of India for this, for the implementation of this. POSCO Act of 2012. NCPCR is playing its role here, right? And after that, you have the Data Protection Bill. The Data Protection Bill that is there. The Data Protection Act that is passed in 2023. There, if you are found that you have stolen the privacy or the privacy right of the child, NCPCR is going to take you, and they are fighting it out here also in the Data Protection Bill, because you might know the rights of a privacy of a child rest with the guardian, of the child. So NCPCR is spreading awareness for that also. For that also, once you give these three common laws, which are going on in the country, and also and also IT Act 2000, IT Act 2000, their sections, right? Their sections 66A, their sections at 67, section 69. How these sections of IT Act 2000, they allow the government to prevent and to block the transmission of any sexually that is prone material which involves child pornography as well. So try to talk about that IT Act 2000, right? Try to talk about that. And after you are done with these, now the next part of the question asks you, they are asking you up that what the measures the commission can initiate to tackle the issue. For that, you need to, if you do not have any information, you will be lacking there. You need to have some sort of idea. For example, you can take examples from UK, you can take examples from Australia, you can take examples from USA, from Singapore. Try to show them how the measures are being taken. How the measures are being taken. For example, UK, think you know, campaign is going on for digital rights of child. Think you know, right? In Singapore also, in Australia also, we see the e-commissioner, e-safety commissioner is there. E-safety commissioner is there to recognize the things. Or even USA also, by the Microsoft, there is an AI which recognizes if any child is involved in any sort of pornographic video content on the internet, they will remove it straight away. So they have that AI initiative by Microsoft. So these kind of initiatives you can talk about. e-safety commissioner is there. If you give any such information to the commissioner, and they will suo moto also monitor such things. They will monitor such things as well. And on part of UK, think on you, think you know campaign is going on for spreading awareness and for punishing any such culprits as well. So these are the three facets of the question you need to talk about. What is NCPCR doing? What is its mandate? How they are putting up the fight for the digital protection? But what is the digital challenge for the kids there? So try to answer that, right? So this much information, even if you don't know about the international initiatives, try to write to the best of your knowledge there. To the best of your knowledge there. Okay. Then we have energy security constitutes a dominant kingpin. Means that is the primary pivot of the India's foreign policy, and it is linked with the India's overarching influence in the Middle Eastern countries. India's overarching influence in the Middle Eastern countries, and energy security is the dominant pawn of India's moves when it comes to its foreign policy moves with the Middle East, right? How would you integrate energy security with India's foreign policy trajectories in the coming years? How would you integrate India's energy security? So India's foreign policy is going on. How you would actually, if imagine yourself to be an Indian foreign officer, IFS officer, and how you would be pivoting India's foreign policy when it comes to engagement with the Middle East, with the middle income, with the middle countries, right? You have to show that. So energy security. No question of IR is complete when you do not give the data. You have to give the data here. And these are very standard data. For example, like 80% of India's oil requirements and 55% of India's gas requirements are made through imports. That is the latest 2023 report which is available as per the economic survey also. And when we talk about the Middle East, we see 40% of India's energy is imported through them. 40% of India's energy is imported through them when we talk about the Middle East. You have to start your question answer with such data points, because the other candidate would be giving such data points. And if you fail to give them these data points, you are in bad place. You are in bad place, my friend. You are not in a good place, because these are very standard data points. These come up daily, almost on a daily level in the newspaper. And we have to just take these points. You read so many information about IR on internet, on YouTube. When you do not know about these basic data, your preparation is seriously lacking. It is seriously lacking. Fine. So give these data points first up. Then we say energy security is the main dominant kingpin of India's foreign policy when it comes to influence in the Middle Eastern countries. Okay. So what we are doing, you have to see that energy security of India, after giving these data points, you have to justify this statement. How? Because we have been engaging with Iran even after the US has warned us so many times. We are with them, right? We are engaging with them, and we have participated in Bab al-Mandeb, Bandar Abbas port, right? Bandar Abbas port, trying to talk about it. Because when this war between Iran and Israel was going on, this Bab al-Mandeb and Bandar Abbas, they were blocked, and it created a huge problem of energy security for India. Give example of Saudi Arabia. How Saudi Arabia is engaging with India, especially the investments made by ONGC Videsh there, because that is a very standard organization which is having investments from Indian side in Sri Lanka as well, regarding the ONGC Videsh, right? After that, also talk about our engagements in Afghanistan, right? Regarding the highway projects, because they are invariably linking India to Middle East, to the nearby region. For example, Central Asia. We are having our energy needs from them. We are having our energy needs from the West Asia via them. You have to give this. And also our sea lanes of communication, SLOC. Our all sea lanes of communication, especially those engaging with Middle East, are designed such that our energy security is not compromised. Our sea lanes of communication, they are invariably to mark energy security of India, and and also tell about the changing nature of these engagements of India's foreign policy. Because in, for example, when we are moving towards renewable energy, right, we are also trying to incorporate these nations. Now is coming the second part of your question. Firstly, explain that. Now, how would you integrate energy security? To start up, just give the current scenario, the current initiative which has started at India Middle East corridor, which will go from India to Europe, taking into account Middle East, right? Start with IMEC. That is very, very important, because now you are asked to integrate. How you will integrate this? Secondly, only international initiative in energy sector, that is ISA. There, India is giving membership to all countries, and their Middle East countries are already becoming its members. So India's energy security is also changing. Energy is not only dependent on the fossil fuels, it is also dependent on the renewable part which is coming up. So try to incorporate that ISA also here. That is also very, very, very important, right? And then in line, in line with with neutral stand. How? How? Because we are also engaging with Saudi Arabia, we are also engaging with Iran, right? So that Shia Sunni fight, which is the popular rivalry of the world in the Islamic nation, we are also trying to balance that out with our foreign policy, which is not only tilted towards energy security, but also gives our stand of multilateralism, neutrality, non-alignment movement, not only in the Cold War era, also in the modern era. Also in the modern era. So try to diversify the horizon, not only within energy security, but also how would you integrate that in India's engagement when it comes to the Middle East? Fine. How would you integrate that? Please tell me, folks, are you able to understand it or not? Please reply me yes or no. Because there I would be able to see that whether the folks are able to understand what line of thought I'm giving to them. It is very important for me to get a gist of what you understand. It is very important for me to get a gist of your understanding. Please tell me how you are able to see this. How you are able to see this. Right? Further, it is asked, how would you integrate energy security? So, when it comes to Middle East, for example, Middle East goes very, like, they got angry with us, they are not comfortable with us. So we have also fought, we have diversified our energy security needs, our energy sources. For example, we are not only dependent on Middle East, we are also pivoting towards Russian gas, Russian oil, Russian gas, right? Also towards USA shale gas, right? Give these kind of inputs as well. Give these kind of inputs as well. Because when you are integrating your foreign policy, energy security in that, try to say that I'm not only dependent on you, I'm also dependent on the rest of the world. And I'm trying to diversify my energy sources in terms of Russian oil or gas, in terms of USA shale gas, right? Try to give that perspective also. Try to, but must start from here. Must start from here. And my engagement with Middle East is also shaping from my connectivity with the rest of the world. My connectivity with the world. So bring the element of INSTC here. That my engagement with the Middle East, my engagement, but my my foreign policy in the coming years will not only be energy security, it will always be connecting the world also. Because China is going very aggressive towards the BRI. It is going very aggressive towards the BRI. So this is like my counter. This is like my counter to B and RI. So if you bring, because you know that China is aggressively engaged in the Middle East. So my foreign policy when it comes to energy security with this region will also be to counter China. And if you are able to bring up this point of view in your answer, the checker would be impressed. That he is thinking holistically. He is not thinking unilaterally towards the Middle East only. He's thinking very holistically towards the connectivity of the world. He's also thinking about diversifying the oil sources or the energy sources. And he's also thinking about So here you can also, in line with the neutrality, for example, Israel-Palestine. Israel-Palestine example can also be given. Right? So try to give that mindset. And if you're able to do it, the checker will open the treasure of marks for you. They are happy to open it. And I believe that this question was not that difficult to attempt, even if your energy, your data points were less. But basic data point was needed: India's energy security and its dependence on the Middle East. And it's dependent on the Middle East. Okay. So the reform process in the US, in the UN remains unresolved. We know that UN is seeking legitimacy now. More because of the delicate imbalance of the East and the West and the entanglement of the US versus Russo-Chinese alliance. Examine and critically evaluate the East-West policy confrontations in this regard. So this is not only targeted towards UN reforms. UN reforms is just an example. To convey that East-West policy is getting bombarded with it so much that UN reforms are also pending and the rest of the things are also pending. You have to give that perspective, right? Okay. So you are asked to justify, to examine that how reforms in the UN remain unresolved. And because of that, the delicate imbalance of the East and the West and entanglement of the USA versus Russo-Chinese alliance also is there, right? So you can start with, if you know about UN80 initiative. UN80 initiative, because this was 80th anniversary of the UN, 80th anniversary of the UN, which was celebrated in 2025. Just in the month of June and July, they celebrated that. And UN80 was that we have to increase the relevance of UN. We have to increase the impact of UN. So start with this current affair, UN80. Start with this current affair, UN80. Because this is asking you that the reform process remains unresolved. Even the UN reform process is unresolved, UN legitimacy is also in danger because of this conflict, because of the East and West conflict and the entanglement of the USA and Russo-Chinese influence. Okay. So after that, give the UN formation. UN formation was because of World War II. That such war should not happen. That is why we brought on UN. If you remember, in 1945, we brought UN that such world wars or such conflicts should not be there, right? But the East and West continued to tangle themselves delicate, right? So after that, give the pending UN reforms. The pending UN reforms, give an highlight of them, how the UN reforms are pending. For example, the UNSC expansion, right? The P5 veto power expansion, try to talk about that. And under that, try to talk about members like UK and France. They support India, but not rigidly. For example, Russia is okay with India's membership, but Russia is very wary of Japan. Try to talk about that. That yes, we want UNSC expansion. Those reforms are pending, especially the P5 veto power. That power needs to be reformed or that needs to be given to other members as well. Because we have a total of 15 members there. Only 5 members have the veto power, right? So try to give that insight. And after that, China blocks India's bid, and it supports the Pakistan initiatives. So try to talk about that. That is one highlight of UN reforms which are pending there. And you have to talk about these things, right? And after that, the US withdrawal, the US threat withdrawal. For example, Paris climate, right? Then UNHCR, then UNESCO, because of their conflict with Russo-China, and this conflict, this delicate West and East, this USA versus China, Russia, this partnership is also, it is getting reflected across Israel, Iran also, which is further pending and questioning what it is getting questioned. And apart from that, that was Russia and Ukraine. You have to question UN legitimacy, that these organizations which were formed, what are they doing? What are they doing? So not only the reforms which are pending, but also where the organization have failed to bring upon the peace in the world. You have to bring those examples there. It is very important that you give those examples there. And after that, what is being asked? They are asking, critically evaluate the East-West policy confrontations in this regard. So now we are giving the one side of the evaluation, and secondly, you have to another give the confrontations. Confrontations where this is happening. Confrontations, if we see, that is ICJ ruling on South China Sea. South China Sea. China not complying. Fine. That is also a problem. Then we have the string of pearls being stitched, right? And this is a response. Quad has come up in the response. Quad def exercises are going on. That are the defense exercises are going on. These sort of confrontations are going on. And regarding the battlefields, which two I just mentioned, that is Iran, Israel, and also the Ukraine, Russia. These battlefields, just mention about them, right? And also about that act of war between India and Pakistan also. Because that Pakistan is being supported by the West. For example, there you see the Turkey coming up. So you should have brought up these angles also. That how that conflict is going on between these two sides, in East and West. So after mentioning that, what you need to do? You need to just stick back to the basics. That just write those good things. India's foreign policy, it advocates international order, respect for international rules. You have to mention. We talk about Vasudev Kutumbakam. Give that idea. And we are trying to have the regional multilateralism, regional organizations, right? Because that is very important when the international organizations are not doing well. So regional organizations they expand to impact and expedite what is required on part of international organizations as well. That is important. For example, give the example of BRICS there, give the example of BIMSTEC there, give such examples. And our bilateral negotiations, for example, recently we cracked India ASEAN deal, recently we cracked India UK SEPA agreement as well. Try to give those inputs so that you are able to tell what should be done to resolve this conflict. No conflict can be resolved unilaterally. You need the multilateral engagement. You need the bilateral engagement because this is a cycle which is going on. Try to understand. These international organizations were brought in the first place so that these conflicts do not arise, or they are satiated in the very first place. But if now those conflicts are arising, it means that these international organizations need to step up. If these international organizations do not step up, these unilateral these sovereign actions from the US, that is a tariff war, or the Chinese action, they will come into again and they will jeopardize the world in all. So try to give that perspective to the examiner via your examples. That is what was needed. So firstly, talk about the UN reforms or talk about the other reforms. Like you can also talk about the WTO reforms. After that, come to what is the delicate conflict between East and West and how that is manifested across the international organizations as well. Fine. But after that, then come to how that critical examination of yours, you should show that confrontations here also. Those confrontations here also. How West organizations are failing to control the Eastern nations and vice versa as well, and how that is in fact coming into these are the manifestations of those conflicts. You have to show that. And finally, after showing, then after setting this, stick back to basics. India's foreign policy, respect for international rule and order, respect, having a mutual respect, give respect to each other's territory, give respect to each other's sovereignty as well. Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam. Then the regional organizations, in such light, when the international organizations are in stalemate, they are not working. We have to work somehow. That is why the regional organizations like BRICS, like we have BIMSTEC, like such organizations, like INSTC. Give that examples, and they will impact and force and expedite the reforms in the international organizations. And we would be fighting for that. And in this light, just conclude with the South-South cooperation. South-South cooperation, how that is putting up the fight for reforms at international level, or the global South cooperation, including the environmental organizations, like COP as well. So expand the horizon of your answer as well, right? Expand the horizon of your answer as well. So I would like to give you really, do not think complex. When you think complex, when you think too much on one example, I'm telling you, you will miss the whole picture. You will just look for that pixel on the screen, but you will just miss that whole picture. So what I would like to thank you, that you should just think of the macro level, how I would need to design my answer. And this answer needs to take into account all the news items or the recent news you come across, how you can integrate your static knowledge with that. And IR is best way to do it. IR is best way to do it. Just have the data points with you, have the recent news with you, and then incorporate that in shaping your argument, right? And with this note, I would be giving the control of this discussion to your esteemed faculty, that is Praveen sir. So please bring forward. And he would be giving you the rest of the questions which are left over in the paper. And sir is here. He has even taken a pill also because he rises very early. So
Thank you
I
so
really
much,
want
sir.
to thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yes,
Thanks a lot.
yes. All yours, sir. All yours.
Thanks. So, hello everyone. Hope you guys have enjoyed the session with Karan sir, as obviously it's mesmerizing with him. So, yes, I can see all lovely comments and very enthusiastic guys here live at this hour, and really appreciable thing, guys. And let's move with the rest of the questions that are left for us to be discussed, right? So, I believe question number 18, 19, and 20, it was what Karan sir just discussed with you guys. So here we go with the leftover questions. Okay, that is, I'll start with question number 7: women's social complement in advancing empowerment and gender equity. Okay, see, till now you guys are all set and done that obviously what is needed is, the proper tackling, obviously, with understanding the core theme of the question. Okay, I have to tackle the core theme of the question. So already Soumya ma'am has discussed, Vishal sir has discussed, and obviously Karan sir has been discussing since an hour also. So here, okay, we have already done with this concept, right? That is the core theme. So here is the question, and let's carve out the core theme. That is, women's social capital complements in advancing empowerment and gender equity. So obviously the question is women empowerment, that's for sure. And here the word is social, or the capital complements. Okay, women's social capital complements. So what is this? As we go ahead, okay, so what is this social capital? How do I just define this term? Okay, that is social capital. Okay. So social capital basically is the dignity or the goodwill, right? Or you can, let's say, the other word that's part of dignity, that is respect, all of these basically, okay, all of these three things, they together combined and create up this thing that is known as what? The simple term, okay, what we say, dignity, goodwill, and respect. Okay, they do create what? The platform, okay, that is referring to Article 21 of the Indian Constitution, that is right to life and personal liberty, where dignity has been mentioned as the core or the intrinsic part of our right to life and personal liberty under Article 21, right? Okay, so this is what the part is, that is Article 21. And now the social capital, once again, respect, goodwill, and dignity. Further, that is going to create what? Your equity, okay? So once upon a time, okay, once upon a time, women, or still, let's say, talk about the present days as well. The events women have faced in their life, like the era when we used to have some evil laws, that's known as sati, or ban on widow remarriages, or something known as child marriages. And the most most number of people, those who used to be troubled with this child marriage, was the women, right? It was not men who were getting troubled. So women have faced some draconian, some evil laws through the ages. Even though presently till 2019, we used to have this thing that is known as triple talaq, right? We were having this trouble, right? So obviously it was something where we kept this mark that we need to update it. Like, for example, after the arrival of books or the principles like Manusmriti, where the position of women was switched to as subordinate to men, right? So going ahead with these norms, what do we have understood? That the social capital was basically lost by women at that time. And now the year 2016, right? The year 2016, where we got the new National Women Empowerment Policy. Right? The new National Women Empowerment Policy. So basically what happened, we have a committee, okay, just 3 years back to 2016, 2013, or actually 2014. A committee was made. What was the name of the committee? Pam Rajput Committee. Okay. The Pam Rajput Committee. As per the reports of the Pam Rajput Committee, they stated that the committee, actually headed by Pam Rajput, okay, the committee stated that women should not be seen, should literally not be seen as a beneficiary, okay, should not be seen as a beneficiary. They should be seen as what? Okay, rather as one of the pillars, as one of the pillars in growth and development of the nation. Right. So this is what was mentioned by Pam Rajput Committee. Okay, right? This is exactly where our question is mentioning. Exactly the same thing our question is referring, that women's social complements, okay, or social capital complements in advancing empowerment and gender equity. So in our same channel on StudyIQ IAS English, I guess around it was month of April or May, the month of April or May, we had this video as well. We had this discussion as well with regard to the gender justice report in India. Okay, if you just scroll through the video section, okay, and if you go through this particular video, okay, that is the gender justice report, okay, which was also called by media as gender injustice report, okay, where we have seen that how there is huge level of scarcity of women inside the workforce or inside the labor force. Only all over India, out of every 100 policemen, we have only 10 or 15 policemen. police as the lady officers. Okay. And the lady officers, specifically in the senior level of police department, they are absolutely absent. The very same thing, the very same data is there in the judiciary, and the very same data is there into the defense, that is in military. So obviously, okay, women are, still struggling to find the equality and equity in the society when it comes to the acquisition of positions. But the very same gender justice report also quoted that where is women? So the women are still, the maximum women are still today, out of 10, every 7 women are still the housewives. Or let's say every out of 10, every 8 women are still the housewives, right? And now the things, the menial jobs, that is this domestic help work or the other type of works, okay, that are not so, providing much of the income, they are morely performed by women still these days. And now there was another report, another point on the very same report, that is the gender justice report, which is also mentioned as injustice report, which says that women are often paid less as compared to the men. So we always have this point with us, right? This Article 39, Clause A, which says that women and men should be having equal opportunity to livelihood, right? And then we also have Article 39, Clause B and C and D, that talks about equal distribution of resources, no concentration of wealth. 39 Clause E, that says equal pay for equal work for both men and women. This is what is mentioned under Article 39, Clause E. Equal pay for equal work for both men and women, right? So this is mentioned. But still, we have seen that the things, they are, not so good. Guys, if there is a lag in the video, okay, so please excuse this part. Actually, this is something which I don't know why it is happening. So I can see there is some lag in the video. So if it is happening, okay, really sorry for the inconvenience, and please ignore this part for a moment. Okay, right. So this is where the question is actually referring. Okay, the social capital. What is social capital? Once again, the dignity, the respect, the goodwill. Okay, this is where the social capital work comes in. The term comes in. It works as in, okay, under Article 21, and then we have got Article 39, Clause A, as well as Clause E, and then yes, the Palm Rajput Committee report. If you have mentioned this today, okay, then you are set and done. You have got the marks, right? So guys, this is with regard to the question number 7 we have got. Yeah. Any questions, guys? Come on. Anyone with any doubts, any questions, any queries? Quickly, please. All those who are live? Probably no. Okay. So let's move to the next question, next part of our question. Okay, or sorry, the next question, not part. The very next question. Question number 8. Civil society organizations are often perceived as being anti-state actors or non-state actors. Well, I believe this is the most disturbing question. Means I'll tell you something. I was having a word with some of our fellow aspirants, fellow students, those who were there today in the examination hall just before starting the session. So they were like, sir, the moment we saw this question, it was really, a big bouncer for us, and we were totally shocked and surprised at how to tackle this question. As in, see the intensity of the question. What is this? The civil society organizations are often perceived as being anti-state actors, okay, than the non-state actors. Now, first of all, let's understand, if you are not able to decode, that what do we mean by the civil society? So civil society as in non-governmental organizations, NGOs, or the pressure groups, okay, or let's say the NPOs, not-for-profit organization, right? So these are what? Basically the civil society organizations, which are working for, let's say, we have got this NAS Foundation case. Okay, let's talk about the NAS Foundation case. So NAS Foundation case 2009. We have also done the video on the very same, okay, if you are our regular viewer of the channel. So you are done with your mains examination as well, right? So the very same video, we have got the NAS Foundation case discussed as well around a month back, okay, where we discussed that how the LGBT community, they got their rights in the year 2009 when the Honorable Delhi High Court struck down the Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code. Then 2013, the NAS Foundation case judgment was really once again challenged by another case through the Kaushal Kumar case. And now this time the Honorable Supreme Court of India reinstated Section 377. And it continued till 2018 until and unless we had the Navteej Singh Johar case. So this NAS Foundation case was, this NAS Foundation. Let's talk about this NAS Foundation, first of all. An NGO, okay? A NGO, basically, a non-governmental organization, which was fighting for the awareness campaign with regard to the sexually transmitted diseases like HIV and AIDS, and apart from the rights of the transgenders, rights of the homosexual community. So they targeted the policies of the state. They targeted the actions of the state, right? And hence they were considered as what? Anti-state. Okay. So many organizations, many cooperative societies, many non-governmental or not-for-profit organizations like, this farmers union, or let's say, for example, we have got another union for the laborers or workers, industrial workers, and so on. Whenever they are working, whenever they are protesting, they're protesting against the policies of the state. So many of the times they must be seen as a non-state actors, as they are non-state actors. But because they are actually targeting the actions of the state, hence they are now considered as what? They are now considered as the non-state, the anti-state actor. So simply, either you are in favor or you are against. But when you are against, you are what? You are anti, right? So guys, what are the whole features that you need to mark here? The question says what? Question says that civil society organizations, they must be non-state actors, as they are in simple. But what they are seen as anti-state actors. Now let's talk about the constitutional provisions of our non-governmental organizations, or basically the non-state actors. Remember, anti-state actors, it is the extremist organizations. If I have to define the anti-state actors, they are the extremist or the terrorist organizations. And here the question is what? CSOs, the civil society organizations, they are anti-state. Well, to be honest, they're not, right? So here we go. The constitutional position of the CSOs, the civil society organizations. So first of all, we have got Article 19, Clause 1, Subclause B, that talks about the freedom to establish organizations. Then we have gotten a statute as well. Okay, we have got a statute as well. And what is the statute? The statute is the Societies Registration Act. Well, the British era law, which came in the year 1860. So through Article 19, Clause 1, Subclause B, we do establish the organizations, whether the political, non-political, governmental, non-governmental, pressure group, or type of anything. Okay, so civil societies, okay, their constitutional position, Article 19, Clause 1, Subclause B, and apart from that, the statute through which they are registered and governed, Societies Registration Act. Now, if we just go ahead and provide the inputs or insights into some recent issues. So one case is obviously the NAS Foundation case, okay? So which was once upon a time heavily criticized, that what they are targeting for. Now, another organizations, let's say presently we have an organization which is basically targeting towards the protection of dogs, right? In Delhi, what you have been watching, okay, right? That is the dogs. How presently Supreme Court has now given the judgment that the dogs, those who are now vaccinated, will be stray dogs, basically, will be sent back to the streets of Delhi, right? So this is what the judgment is. This is what basically the story is, right? And now we have seen that many people, they filed the petition in the Supreme Court. Many people, they filed the petition in the state high courts as well, that no, it's time for us to provide the dogs with the freedom. Right? And now they are considered as anti-state again. That what are they looking for? They are looking for those things which are, not so good, which are not so valuable, which are not so feasible as well. Okay. So wherever the judgment comes in, okay, if there is any organization that is raising the volume, raising the voice against that one particular policy, will be considered as anti-state. This is what the present point of view has been created. This is what the present kind of a vacuum has been created. And this is very, very unhealthy, very literally unhealthy for the state as a whole, for the nation as a whole, for the citizens as a whole. So this is where the question is. Okay. Now, moving on to the next one, question number 9. This time, it's with regard to international relations. So India-Africa Digital Partnership is achieving mutual respect, co-development, and long-term institutional partnerships. Okay, so listen here. India-Africa. So they have actually mentioned the whole continent, right? It's not just country. India, along with the whole continent of Africa, the question is. Okay, so countries like with whom we share some common history, that is South Africa. Okay. Or let's say the other countries with whom the history might not be common, but conditions are Uganda, Kenya. Okay. So, or Ethiopia, which is being troubled because of too much of internal disturbances. Then it is also about the importance of Africa. African nations might be weak. African nations might be poor. African nations might not be that great players into the geopolitics. But African nations, we have to understand that they are rich in mineral resources. Mineral resources from lithium to gold to iron to silver, then aluminium, and yes, also the crude oil, right? So these are the things which are very, very important for a country's growth and development. Well, this Africa is also good with diamonds, right? And yes, coal. And now Africa is also a good hub from Bab el Mandab, okay, going ahead to the Cape of Good Hope, to the Horn of Africa, right? So these are the locations which are considered strategically quite important, as well as it becomes not just from the defense perspective. It becomes important not from just the defense perspective, but also from the economics perspective. As being a strategic location, there are also good ports where from actually, we have seen that how the Saharan areas as well as the non-Saharan areas of Africa, how they have provided much boost to the local transportation, right? Hence, as a result, this time the question is with regard to the whole of the state. And this time it's Africa. So going ahead and understanding the mutual respect, co-development, and long-term institutional partnerships. So though specifically in our foreign policy, okay, specifically talking about India's foreign policy. Okay. So the basis of our foreign policy, what has been? So it has been always mutual coexistence. It has been always something that is known as promotion of peace, promotion of trade, then non-interference, and yes, for sure, respecting the sovereignty. So Yes, you might be thinking it is something that is related to Panchsheel. Yes, it is Panchsheel. Panchsheel was started by us for China. But Panchsheel, with the passage of time, gradually, slowly and steadily, gradually, it became core of our foreign policy, starting with the Nehruvian foreign policy, transcending through the eras of Lal Bahadur Shastri Sahab, then Indira Gandhi, Rajiv Gandhi, Moraji Desai in between, and then finally we have got Narasimha Rao, and then comes in one of the persons as a prime minister who has gained a benchmark achievement in global politics. That is, no, I'm not talking about what you're thinking. It's I.K. Gujral. So we have been following the Gujral doctrine. Okay, the year 1997. Right. This Gujarat doctrine has specially focused or gave a special kind of an attention to the area that is known as Africa. Okay, so just considering this one particular African continent. Okay, it's about the strategic locations. Strategically, they are quite important, as well as the ports, okay, that connects the Middle East, the Europe, the North America, as well as the South America, right? So if you go through the map, right? So from India, so you will see African nation, African whole continent is in mid, okay, connecting Middle East, Europe, North America, and then to South America. Right. So a major chunk, a major population, or the major areas of the globe is being covered by us through which continent? Through Africa. And so we need it along with us. We need it on our side. So it's with us, no doubt in that. Right? Okay. So this is where the question is. Digital partnership, yes, our UPIs are very soon to be activated throughout the whole of African continent, very, very soon. Okay, and apart from that, yes, India's digital governance program. African nations are very keen. They have shown always keen interest in coming up together and establishing the digital infrastructure, the digital network, and every single thing. Right? Okay. So this is question number 9 for us. And then we are moving forward with the last one of the day. Okay. That is the 10th question. With the waning of globalization post-Cold War, world is becoming a site of sovereign nationalism. Well, before we discuss sovereign nationalism, okay, there is a word that has been into the limelight, into the center of attention and discussion and debate as well. That is known as a strategic autonomy. And also the different part, okay, that is known as trade protectionism. So before we go ahead and discuss this, let's talk about the problems faced by the globe for now. Okay, how this globe is right now becoming an area of turbulence, right? The whole globe, okay, it is now the area of turbulence. So from the conflict zones, Russia, Ukraine, US, China, India, and here we have got Pakistan, unfortunately, Bangladesh, unfortunately, then we have got Nepal here, unfortunately, as well, Sri Lanka, whole of Middle East from Afghanistan to Iran, Iraq, and then transcending through areas of Mediterranean from Palestine to Israel to Lebanon, okay, and then the areas of Sudan, South Sudan, then we have got the problem in Eritrea, then we have got the problems here in Nigeria, a very deadly terrorist organization known as Boko Haram active here. Okay. Then other problem here in the region itself, Myanmar. then transcending again through the Chinese region, Taiwan, or the whole of South China Sea, the 9-line region. Okay. So if you see, almost all the major powers are in conflict. Okay. And then here we have got North Korea as well. So a kind of a web has been created, a web of conflicts have been created, which has literally disturbed the global trade, the global economy. The geopolitics is facing a turbulence that has the capacity to ignite or initiate the next great war, that will be the World War III. And this time we know it very well. These world wars, if they're fought, or a world war, if it is fought, it would be not less than a nuclear war. What we have observed, that how one Kirana Hills disturbed the peace of multiple governments, disturbed the peace of those nations which are 7 seas away from us, which are moons away from us, that's US. How Turkey intervened and sent its flight, its jet to Kirana Hills, that is to Pakistan. How America got troubled that, oh my God, there could be a nuclear radiation leak that could initiate the nuclear war. Meanwhile, North Korea waiting in the corner that, oh, you started? Why not yet? Damn, right? So obviously, there have been instances where we have almost knocked the World War III, and we have returned back before it opened the doors for us, right? So obviously, this is the time where this one, and here is a senile personality on the throne back again, Mr. Donald J. Trump, who has came forward with a policy that I will make MAGA. MAGA as in Make America Great Again. And for this, Mr. Donald J. Trump and for whole America, they are, okay, what they are doing is they are just using what their economy, as in to spread the problem. Simply the unusual, unrealistic tariffs. Unusual, unrealistic, irrational, illogical. Well, America has an upper hand in technology, no doubt in it. Defense technology, digital technology, from Google to Facebook, that is the whole of Meta, including your WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Apple, Microsoft, they all are centered in America. The best weapon companies, they are centered in America. The best equipment companies, they are centered in America. So America knows it very well, that it can hamper and shatter the global trade, specifically the digital infrastructure of the globe in a minute, like this. It has just, to ask, the government just needs to ask Microsoft that shut down your server for a day. And yes, it will. I guess last year, probably, if I'm not wrong, last year, October or November, what we have faced, what world has faced, that the server of Microsoft got a bug for a day, and how the railways, airports, offices, their work got interrupted. Billions and billions of dollars was lost in less than 24 hours, that is less than one day. So America knows this. Donald Trump knows this. And this is where they're using this power, that we have got the command of economy in our hand. And so the imposition of tariffs. These tariffs are not less than just a very severe, intense, intimate type of what we say invitation to the next war. That will be the world war, that will be the nuclear war, right? So it's time for us to go ahead with trade protectionism. Go ahead and have your own type of environment, economic environment, where you are going ahead with indigenous production. Simply speaking, okay, in layman's term, if you want to listen, it's Atmanirbhar Bharat, self-reliant India. Okay, what a policy we got in 2020. Okay, so Atmanirbhar Bharat, it's not just about Bharat, it's about every country. They want themselves to make self-reliant so that they're not depending on any foreign country for any XYZ ABC products. And so these countries, they're all in this race to have a shade or have a shed or a shelter where they're producing sufficient for themselves, for their population, and also they're producing enough to to export as well, so that they can grab the spine of the other countries and make the grape wine out of it, right? And use it in the time of any kind of an emergency or unavoidable and unusual situations. For example, Russia. Today, Russia has hampered the whole Europe, what Europe has done since last 3 years. 3 years plus, 2022, February 2022. Russia invaded. Russia attacked Ukraine, which was almost part of NATO. Almost. Not exactly, but almost. Just a sign was left. All deals, all negotiations, all discussions, all delegations, all deliberations were all set and done. And NATO was all set to sign and become the very fresh party. Ukraine was all set to sign and become the very fresh party to NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. The very same Ukraine which was once upon a time part of the USSR. And now, obviously, Russia didn't like it. And hence, just like Crimea, annexation of Ukraine could be possible quite soon, what we have observed. So, what happened after that? America, the whole of Europe, they started putting sanctions on Russia. Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, has been declared as a war criminal and has been issued arrest warrant as well by the International Court of Justice, ICJ, and this arrest warrant was issued 2 years back. Have they arrested Russian president? Have they stopped Russia from going ahead with any kind of a trade? Well, Europe, which is criticizing Russia on the very same part, Europe is also signatory to the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline. Very less people are aware with this, but you are part of those less people, right? So Nord Stream 1 and Stream 2 gas pipeline, where Russia is supplying the gas almost to the whole of Europe. And the biggest party here with Russia is Germany. Biggest party. Okay, biggest party to Russia is what? Germany, right? So this country is alone there who is facing utmost level of criticism from the whole of European Union that why are you not shutting down the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline with Russia? And then Germany comes in. Okay, I'm going to shut down. Are you going to suffice my gas requirement? Forget about me. Are you going to suffice your gas requirement? Forget about it. Are you going to suffice your crude oil requirement if Russia stops in? Well, you will be able to buy it from the other OPEC countries for sure. But you know how much inflation it would spark, how much hyperinflation it would spark in case Russia steps out of the deal with regard to the supply of crude oil as well as refined crude oil to the European countries? It will create, once again, huge chaos, a very negative type of a vacuum where the economy will be sucked out and some giants would be only benefited. And those giants will be once again sitting in America, China, India, and yes, for sure, Russia. So these giants, they'll know it very well that these people would be blabbering, but they won't be able to do anything. So here the trade protectionism is important, right? To have most number of, resources, production, okay, in your own country and in a way that is sufficient for your population as well as it is sufficient for the export as well. So that once again, you can have the spine and then spread the grape wine later on, right? So this is what the whole scenario is towards the terms trade protectionism, and ultimately it will lead to strategic autonomy. If you're having good amount of money, see how the cycle goes. Money means military. Military means market. Market means money, and the cycle goes on, right? So how America became America? Money, military, market, money. How England once upon a time became England, having its territories throughout the globe, from Australia to Africa to Asia to Europe, obviously, to North America to South America. There was no continent left where there was no English territory. Obviously, Antarctica, you will say, but it is a still inhabited continent. So habitated continent, all those 6 continents, okay, which are habitated: Asia, Europe, Africa, North America, South America, Australia. They are all, it is the place where England was having their own territory. So they stated that sun never sets in the British Empire. Why so? Because in one territory, if there is sunset, then in some other corner of the world, there is sunrise. And it's British territory once again, right? So this is what the whole scenario is. This is what the whole logic is. Trade protectionism is important for the sake of strategic autonomy, and this strategic autonomy will lead to what? Will lead to the sovereign nationalism. Okay, and this thing has ignited, okay, with the waning of the globalization post Cold War. Okay, and the world is becoming a site of what? The sovereign nationalism. So post Cold War, what we have seen after the disintegration of USSR, how the globe became a unipolar world, like till what do you say, 1990. So the globe was exactly like this. The West world dominated by USA, the East world dominated by USSR, Soviet and Socialist Republic, right? Union of Soviet and Socialist Republic. So after the end of the era 1989, or specifically 1990, where we call it as the era which disintegrated the USSR and multiple satellite states came into existence of Russia, right? From Ukraine to Crimea to Kazakhstan to Azerbaijan and many other countries, right? So now this world was actually unipolar. And for next 1.5 decades, you can say next till 2005-6 era, this globe was now only dominated by just one country, US. And then China comes into the light. And how China comes into the light? Once again, what are the features? First thing, trade protectionism, which allowed China to go ahead with the strategic autonomy, which allowed China to go ahead with sovereign nationalism. You can read it like this: trade protectionism to strategic autonomy to sovereign nationalism, or you can just reverse it as well. Sovereign nationalism that leads to strategic autonomy that leads to trade protectionism, right? So this is where China became China, or Russia became Russia, or France became France. Any superpower that became superpower, okay, whether it is US, it is China, it's Russia, it's France, it's any country, they have followed such a thing. And specifically, they have been following since the establishment of the New World Order. And yes, they have given more impetus, more focus, more concentration, more attention. They have just created an epicenter of their all attention towards the trade protectionism post-Cold War era after the disintegration of 1990, right? So this is what the reality is, okay? Just a second, guys. Our current sir is waiting for something. We need to answer him. Right, okay. So guys, this is what the whole scenario is, okay, with regard to the sovereign nationalism. You have to go ahead with the sovereignty, right? So any questions at this late night hour? Well, I remember now the speech by our beloved first Prime Minister. At the stroke of the midnight hour, when the world sleeps, India will awaken to meet the new horizons of growth and development. The very famous speech, Tryst with Destiny. So I see you guys here this time at the stroke of the midnight hour, right? Well, good enthusiasm, guys. I really appreciate many people, those who are live here, and many people, those who are commenting here. Fantastic, really fantastic. You guys are representing that, yes, your hard work, your caliber is beyond, your dedication is beyond the thing that will, stop you from achieving anything. That's beyond the level of hard work where I shall land myself to success. Obviously, where it is, it's in the Queen of Hills, Trans-Himalayan region. It is, right? The city known as Mussoorie. Well, we have got the place there, Civil Services Institute, named as Lal Bahadur Shastri National Academy of Administration. Labasna calling, Labasna waiting with the gate, Sheelam Param Bhushanam, right? So we need to reach there. And your enthusiasm right now is representing exactly the same. Okay, guys, so this is it with regard to the paper discussion of our GS paper 2. Mains 2025. So we have discussed all of the questions in a very holistic manner in as much as detail as we can. So guys, once again, really appreciable for many people live here with us. And I wish all of you good luck. And I wish you all the best of luck once again. And keep this spark, keep this energy with you always. And this will give you the greatest level of success for sure. Okay, guys. So with this, I bid adieu for the day. We'll meet up tomorrow in GS Paper 3 and GS Paper 4 discussion. Good day, everyone. Actually, good night, everyone. See you tomorrow. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.